Chapter 748. This chapter is, The Chariot Past. Ahem. List coughed dryly. Dinho was talking about Ella. After Ella saw the P-Elf move into the bug room, she began to declare her sovereignty. In Thorn Castle, Ella thought that she was the boss, and sooner or later she would be subdued. She didn't expect a big elf to appear halfway, which made her nervous. What's more, there was a big elf with sharp teeth living outside the castle. These elves were constantly provoking her position, which was not a good sign. Thorn Castle would not allow such a powerful elf to exist. Ella is just a little grumpy. You can just ignore it. Anyway, since you're here, you have to integrate into my family. List shook hands with the P-Elf. How about we start by changing our names and slowly get used to the new life? Change my name? Well, Dinho is a thing of the past. You should have a new name. No matter how smart the P-Elf was, it was only a big elf. Soon, List guided it out of its disappointment. What name should I change? You are a P-Elf. I think the name, Ike, is more suitable for you. There was once a very powerful knight named Ice Archer Ike. She had a P-Elf who evolved into a dragon elf. Others gave her a nickname, P-Archer. List casually made up a story. After a few books, his ability to tell stories was already very good. I hope you can evolve into a dragon elf one day, so Ike will be a good wish. The P-Elf tilted its head and thought for a moment, then readily agreed. Well, then I will be called Ike. That was it. List's second elf was officially named Ike. Although it was a second-hand elf, it still made him excited for a long time. It had to be said that compared to Parker, a big elf who could ruin the scenery with his mouth, the P-Elf was really beautiful and deserved the beautiful title of elf. Her personality was also very normal. She might be a little cold, but most elves were relatively cold. After asking about Ike's favorite flavor of corn powder, List immediately asked someone to bring a lot for her as a snack. He then closed the door and left the room. Just in time to hear Ella at the window of the worm room, making a wow sound. List looked up at the chandelier on the walkway and felt a little emotional. Why do the elves I get have such personalities, while the elves others get are so peaceful? Is it because I respect the development of the elves' personality? In his opinion, it was very likely that this was the case. The great nobles of this world treated elves as farming tools. He was the only one who saw the elves as independent individuals and did not restrict the development of the elves' individual will. Parker's venomous tongue and narcissism, Ella's domineering and violent temper, Nami's socialization and diligence, Mickey's addiction to counting corn, and Fitz, Tam and Eddie's frequent civil war. He did not impose any restrictions. He only set a bottom line: they were not allowed to hurt the elves, and they were not allowed to hurt each other. Judging from the fact that Ella has triggered the evolution of the great elves, my reasonable connivance may be more helpful to the evolution of the elves. List was vaguely proud of himself. Perhaps, as he had guessed, personality could play a role in promoting the evolution of elves. In the beginning, Ella broke the shackles of fate and evolved into a little elf because of the Thorns Worm's unwillingness. And Ella, whose status was threatened, began to trigger the evolution of a great elf because of her desire to be strong. Maybe I can start from the personality aspect and cultivate the potential of the elves to evolve. Forget it, it always feels like a kind of destruction to interfere with the personality of the elves. Now that I am a dragon knight, there is no need to torture the elves. I will provide convenience for them, and the rest is to let them live a stable life. List had never been able to treat the elves as a tool. Wow! His thoughts were interrupted by Ella's cry. He no longer thought about these things. Everything was fine. The top priority was to complete the evolution of Ella and welcome his third great elf. I hope this snow does not affect too much area, otherwise the thorns will not be easy to find. Thorns were evergreen plants, often mixed in bushes. It was easy to find the traces of thorns in winter, provided that it did not snow. If the snow was buried, nothing could be found. In the evening, the Iron Knight Alvin Eaglesword came to Thorn Castle and sent the improved Roar of Thunder Knight suit. Your Royal Highness, according to your request and with the assistance of the Guild of Magic, I have successfully engraved the flame pattern on the Roar of Thunder and added some fire attribute materials, which can effectively increase the fire attribute of combat energy. This set of knight armor was originally worn by Carl Law. However, Carl Law was much shorter than List, so it had to be improved. The improved Fury of Thunder was no longer silver-white, but a silver-white background with fiery red lines outlined. From a distance, the red lines were distinct, and the color effect of the flame was very three-dimensional. Not bad, the improvement is very good. After changing to the Roar of Thunder, it felt very suitable. After sending Alvin away, he went straight to the locker room to look in the mirror. The mirror reflected a handsome and domineering knight. Putting on the helmet and looking left and right, List said again, "Bring me my tricolor cloak." Usually, these equipment were placed in the space ring, but occasionally they would be taken out for the servants to clean. Soon, the manservant Thomas handed over the cloak and helped List put it on his shoulders. At this moment, List was wearing the Roar of Thunder, with the Ice Soul Dragon slaying sword at his waist, a red, black, and gold-edged tricolor cloak on his back, and 3 space rings on his hands. Handsome, confident, and domineering. I always feel that the color of the sword doesn't match. The color of the armor and cloak are very compatible. The red cloak and the red armor lines complement each other. But the blue greatsword doesn't match. If I replace the Ice Soul Dragon slaying sword with the pure silver Fury of Thunder, the lack of red lines doesn't seem to match. Alvin is still too noob to engrave the flame pattern on the Fury of Thunder. The quality of the material of the Dragon Spear Fury of Thunder was far superior to the material of the armor Roar of Thunder. Alvin was just an ordinary Iron Knight and could not carry out a second forging. He changed out of the armor. Changing back to Frack Abier, List walked into the study and continued to ponder the Fire Dragon Knight, Dragon Combat's secret book. Recently, he was entangled with mundane affairs. At present, this secret book still only had one move, dragon slaying. Countless inspirations collided and flashed in his mind, and he did not settle down to ponder. And he was destined to not ponder for long, and was entangled with trivial matters again. Chi returned from the sea. Like List, she had been arming her strength during this period, always thinking of creating powerful magic in line with her identity as a magic shooter. So now you've created magic that is stronger than advanced magic? List asked as he followed Chi out. The level of magic was officially registered by the Guild of Magic. It was classified into 3 categories: basic magic, prototype magic array, ordinary magic, static magic array, and advanced magic, dynamic magic array. Chi nodded and said, "Brother." Chi studied the Weave and Dragon Combat's secret book, plus the knowledge that Brother taught in the past, and finally found the clue of higher-level magic. The first new magic that surpasses advanced magic is still in its embryonic form and not perfect. They came to the sea. While the sky was not completely dark, Chi began to release her new magic. She took a deep breath and brewed it for a full 10 seconds before suddenly raising her right hand. The next moment, the weave appeared, and countless high-energy magic was extracted from the weave. On the calm sea, a huge water curtain slowly rose. The water curtain seemed to form the shape of a chainsaw, and the water at the edge of the saw moved at high speed, making a sound similar to a sonic boom. "Go!" Chi waved to the rocky beach on the shore. Chapter 749. It was very powerful. List felt that the power of Chi's magic was comparable to a charged attack when he was riding a dragon, but it was still a little short of the power of the Dragon Slash. If he were to use the Dragon Slash, I'm afraid that one move would not only cut the rocky beach in half, but the surrounding rocks would also be completely shattered. The move of the Dragon Warrior contained real explosive power. Can't it be cast instantaneously? List jumped to the rocky beach and carefully examined the rocks cut by the water chainsaw. The cut was not smooth, but the power of the attack was very condensed. In the vision of the magic eye, he could still see traces of magic. According to his experience, such power could already pose a great threat to the Dragon Knight, and it was indeed beyond the level of advanced magic. Achi shook her head and said, "Not yet. This kind of magic is very difficult to maintain. The rune calculations required are very complex, and the power will be doubled with the help of the sea. But if it is released on the ground, not only the release speed will be slowed down, but the power will also be weakened a lot." List subconsciously reached out and stroked Achi's blue hair. "Practice more. If you master this move, you'll definitely be on par with a full-fledged Dragon Knight in a head-on battle on the sea." When she was with List, Achi would take off her hood and reveal her flawless face. Unfortunately, since putting on clothes, she has never shown her natural figure in front of List. This often made List feel sorry. "By the way, do you have a name for this magic, and how do you judge the level? What do you think, brother? I don't know much about the magic principle of this move, so I can't judge it. You make your own decision. The cleverest housewife cannot cook without rice." List did not understand this magic at all, and he was a little tired thinking about it. Achi thought for a moment. "Then this magic will be called Chainsaw Super High Pressure Water Knife. Its principle is similar to chainsaw and high pressure water knife. As for the level, it will be classified as super magic. According to the principle of magic arrays, it should be a dynamic acceleration magic array, or a high-speed magic array." At this point, the classification of magic was completely clear. The magic cultivation system was also in sharp contrast with the knight cultivation system. Basic magic, prototype magic array, magic apprentice versus apprentice knight, elementary combat energy, basic combat energy moves. Normal magic, static magic array, magician versus earth knight, intermediate chi secret book. Advanced magic, dynamic magic array, archmagus versus sky knight, advanced warrior energy secret book. Super magic, high speed magic array, magic shooter versus dragon knight, draconic energy secret manual. With such a comparison, List keenly discovered that regardless of whether it was the Dragon Knight or the Mage, the two different training systems had a similar hierarchy. It could be seen that in terms of the use of magic, regardless of whether it was a knight who focused on refining his own combat aura or a sorcerer who absorbed free magic, they both achieved the same result through different means. No wonder the world was once ruled by mages, and now the world is ruled by knight. These two cultivation systems are probably highly efficient at using mana. Survival of the fittest. That was probably the reason. On the way back, List raised another question. Achi, the mage and the knight's training methods are similar, and the magic shooter uses the magic net, while the dragon knight uses the magic net. Do you think there will be a higher level of mage and knight if we continue to train? I don't know, brother. Achi hasn't even studied the magic shooter thoroughly yet. All right. List himself had not studied the Dragon Knight thoroughly, so he no longer worried about the future and asked, "You have been preparing to switch elemental forms, have you found any clues to switch?" Achi was a water mage and could not release the other 7 types of magic, which made her feel that her strength was greatly limited. In view of the fact that she could use magic traction to release natural magic that belonged to chaos magic, and that she had recently developed a magic armament that could store clothes. In theory, the magic shooter could use the magic net to forcibly switch their own elemental bodies to complete the release of various types of magic. However, she shook her head. "I feel that there are a lot of clues, but after careful study, I found too many problems and restrictions, so Achi is still distressed." "All right, take your time to study, no hurry." There was indeed no need to worry about the current situation. The news that the Eagle Kingdom was holding on to the light green gem dragon showed that the kingdom was empty and simply unable to launch another dragon-slaying war. The Iron and Steel Ridge Kingdom sent an emissary mission, indicating that they had the intention of befriending and not resorting to war. The two kingdoms that could influence the sea were stable, so naturally, List was more stable. He was waiting for the arrival of the emissary mission. However, before the emissary mission arrived, Marquis Merlin arrived at Black Horse Island with Meopel and his wife. At the request of Marquis Merlin, the fleet went straight to Black Horse Port without passing through Tulip Castle. List personally welcomed them to the port. The palace speedboat docked, and Meopel and Angela supported a white-haired old man as they slowly disembarked from the ship. It was the grandfather that List felt closest to, Merlin Longtaro. Grandfather. Good. Marquis Merlin gripped List's hand tightly, but his body had completely collapsed. No matter how tightly he gripped, it would be too weak. His complexion was also extremely gloomy, making people wonder if he could survive this winter. However, the old man was in a good mood. When the news that List had become a dragon knight reached his ears, he understood that the Taro family had an unshakable backer. The family might not dare to say that it would flourish forever, but at least during the years when List was alive, it was absolutely safe and sound, and no one dared to touch it. Because Marquis Merlin's health was too poor, he did not stay at the port. He directly boarded a carriage and headed for Thorn Castle. List rode the chocobo Loki. Under normal circumstances, he did not ride Leo as it was inconvenient to go back and forth, so he rode Loki to hurry along. Meopel rode a steed and walked side by side with List. List, you're really something. His expression was excited as he exclaimed in admiration, Dragon Knight, you are actually my cousin. I haven't been able to sleep well for several days, it feels incredible. Just as so. You know, as soon as I say that I am the cousin of the Dragon Knight, many aristocratic ladies would crazily throw themselves at my bed, just to get an excuse that is almost impossible to get close to you. List paid attention to the main point, are you still messing around outside? No, I am very decent. Oh, by the way, I have good news, I can't help but tell you. Meopel had a happy expression on his face. After taking the life vitality potion you sent, I finally succeeded. Angela is pregnant. Huh. Oh, congratulations. List was really happy for his cousin. Meopel grinned, thank you. After returning to Thorn Castle, List settled Marquis Merlin down, sent a knight to Tulip Castle to send a message, and prepared for a luncheon. Marquis Merlin came to Black Horse Island for the new year. Now that Thorn Castle was completely built, there were too many houses to live in, and it was not a problem to receive all the members of the Taro family. However, Masiro and his wife had to wait until the day before the new year. After all, they still had to preside over the affairs of Red Crab Island. After a while, heavy snow was still falling. Marquis Merlin stood on the balcony of Thorn Castle and watched as List called out the little fire dragon Leo. Chapter 750. If one was not from this world, it would be difficult to understand the knight's attitude towards dragons. It was an emotion that had been brainwashed from childhood to adulthood. Even if List himself was obsessed with dragons and liked the beauty of power, it still could not compare to the reverence the indigenous people had for dragons. It was a mixture of many emotions, reaching a distorted and morbid degree. There was reverence like worshipping a god, but there was also a possessiveness like wanting to destroy it if it could not be obtained. A few decades ago, Marquis Merlin communicated with the sapphire dragon and expressed that if it was not contracted, the dragon lord would kill it. That might have been a joke, or he only dared to say it while the sapphire dragon was asleep. But now, the aged Marquis Merlin could no longer say those frivolous words of his youth. He just looked at the little fire dragon Leo and constantly praised him. So beautiful. Leo had always despised humans, so he was very dissatisfied that he was repeatedly called out by List like a monkey being looked at as if he was a rare monkey. He turned his head and coldly glanced at Thorn Castle before flapping his wings and flying into the sky, quickly disappearing without a trace in the heavy snow. Ah, the fire dragon flew away. Meopel exclaimed from the side. List explained, Leo is just flying around in the sky, it will come back soon. He and Leo could communicate with each other through the Dragonheart code, which was an ultra-long-distance communication technology. Little Princess Angela supported Marquis Merlin. She had seen the sapphire dragon since childhood and grew up with dragons, so she was no stranger to dragons. She had the most complicated feelings towards List's fire dragon. The fire dragon had saved Sapphire, but because of the fire dragon, Sapphire was about to lose its hegemony. Moreover, she looked up and thought of the petite maid she had seen in the living room. She suddenly felt a mountain of pressure. In this strange-looking castle without battlements or arrow towers, which seriously lacked a sense of security, lived a dragon knight and an arch-wizard. It was really hard to imagine. The Taro family, which she had once looked down upon, had become a great aristocrat that could not be ignored because of the relationship between the dragon knight and the arch-wizard. She had to restrain her thoughts and earnestly play the role of the future mistress of the Taro family. Now that she was pregnant, she was completely related to the Taro family. Sigh. Angela sighed in her heart. Women couldn't escape the shackles of their families after all. Their unrestrained and wanton lives had come to an end. Grandpa, the temperature on the balcony is low. Let's go back to the room, List said. Some of the rooms in the Thorn Fort had already been installed with calming divine beads, making them warm in winter and cool in summer. Marquis Merlin refused. When the fire dragon comes back, I'll take another look. Seeing this, List immediately used the Dragonheart code to call Leo, telling him to come back quickly and not to wander around in the snow. After a while, Leo landed on an open space near the castle. The open space had been tamped down, and a 100-meter-high stone platform would be built here next spring. The rocks produced by the blizzard beast are piled up nearby, ready for construction at any time. After Marquis Merlin carefully admired it for a moment, List waved his hand, and Leo flew into the sky in an instant, turning into a ball of flames and rushing into his body. An elemental dragon is truly amazing, Marquis Merlin exclaimed. In the afternoon of the next day, the family from Tulip Castle arrived at Thorn Fort. Lady Penelope, Lee William, Lady Marie, Levis, Rolia, Elvira, Lytton, and little Richard all followed the team. After some pleasantries, they settled down at Thorn Fort. Lady Penelope and Elvira planned to stay at Thorn Fort until the end of the new year, and List naturally would not refuse. Thorn Fort was big enough. It was just that there was a shortage of servants in the castle. The dozens of child servants that had been trained were obviously not competent for their own work. They could only select serfs who had been servants in the Eagle Kingdom from the new serfs in the territory and continue to serve Thorn Fort. The serpentines of these servants were very poor, so they did some manual work. The former servants of the castle, such as Thomas, Little Lily, and the others, began to do the work of receiving guests. Perhaps their background and self-restraint were still lacking compared to the servants of great nobles, but this was only the beginning. With the rise of List, their background could naturally be slowly accumulated. After the banquet, the female guests gathered together and gossiped. The men went to List's study, which could be called a library. Rows of bookshelves were filled with all kinds of books. Of course, most of the books List had not even read. He only used them to decorate his appearance and let people know that he was a well-read and cultured person. The servants served tea. The topic mainly revolved around how List would establish a kingdom in the future. Whether it was the Tulip family or the Taro family, they were not old nobles. They had not experienced the founding of the Grand Duchy of Sapphire, so they had no idea how to establish a kingdom. But even if they had not eaten pork, they had seen pigs run. The Sapphire family's operation method was the best reference. Has the family thought of a new surname? Lee William asked. Splitting the family was inevitable. After all, List was only the second son of the Tulip family. He did not legally have the right to inherit the family. The greater his achievements, the more inevitable the result of splitting the family would be. Tentatively, it will be Flame, List replied. He had more than one dragon, but the family name could only be named after the exposed fire dragon. He really could not think of a better surname. Raging Flame was too vulgar, Burning Flame was too light, Burning Sky was too Chinibu, Fury Flame was too extreme, and Dragon Flame was too common. No matter which one he chose, he would regret it. After thinking about it, he simply used the straightforward Flame as the new surname, just like the Sapphire family used Sapphire as their surname. Sometimes, straightforwardness was the foundation. The royal family of the Eagle Kingdom had the surname White Iron, and the surname Moonlight Silver. They were equally straightforward, using the name of the dragon as their surname. Leo was the fire dragon, and the fire dragon was the incarnation of the flame. Flame was the purest name. Perhaps it did not sound as pretentious as Raging Flame, Burning Sky, Red Lotus of Fire, Eternal Flame, and Prairie Fire. But if one carefully tasted it, the flame had a kind of natural charm. In any case, the surnames of nobles were not fixed. When there were more dragon riders, at worst, they would just change it to some domineering surname like Lord of Dragons or Dragon Shepherd. Marquis Merlin chewed on the word flame and unconsciously nodded. List Flame, I think it's not bad. It suits your temperament as a fire dragon knight. So, when are you going to separate? Levis followed up with a question. After the new year. List himself did not care. Regardless of whether he separated or not, there would not be too many changes. The Tulip family would also not become estranged because of the separation. For example, the Golden Wheat family that Luo Lia came from maintained a very close relationship with the Golden Wheat family. They did not have the idea that they would be strangers after the separation. When the small Kerchief Island Lord was destroyed, the big Kerchief Island Lord had worked hard for the small Kerchief Island Lord. Separation meant the prosperity of the family. In the Blue Blood Alliance, there were many small families that had been separated from the Sapphire family, surrounding and protecting the Sapphire family. As such. Chapter 751. This chapter is Fairy in Dreamwalking. Grandfather, Father, how do you think we should deal with the coming Steel Ridge Kingdom emissary delegation? The topic in the study revolved around establishing a nation. List was looking forward to Marquis Merlin and Marquis Oxtail's political wisdom. It was true that he was the dragon knight who stood at the peak of power, but establishing a nation could not be stabilized by strength alone. He still needed to balance his own forces and external forces. In this regard, he obviously did not see it as clearly as the two veteran nobles. The most important thing was that he had only been rising for a short time and did not have a deep understanding of the world's knight system. In other words, he despised this backward system in his heart. He knew that the system must be in line with productivity, but he could not dispel his sense of superiority from the civilized world and change his contempt for the backward system. First of all, we need to analyze the purpose of the Steel Ridge Kingdom emissary delegation. Marquis Merlin set the tone. Judging from the current information, the emissary delegation must have come for the situation of List's nation. The Dragon Knight and the Magic Shooter working together will be unstoppable. The attitude of the Steel Ridge Kingdom should be obvious. Lee William nodded. The Steel Ridge Kingdom hopes to become their vassal state, expand their forces, and treat the future flame like Sapphire. Maybe List, you will be named the Grand Duke of the Flame soon. So, Father, Grandfather, do you support my country becoming a vassal state of the Steel Ridge Kingdom? If we want to establish a nation in this sea, becoming a vassal state of the Steel Ridge Kingdom is the best choice. The Eagle Kingdom has mastered sailing technology and is in a competitive relationship with us. Moreover, the Eagle Kingdom is declining. If we unite with the Steel Ridge Kingdom, we may be able to share more benefits in the future. Lee William said. Marquis Merlin frowned. Uniting with the Steel Ridge Kingdom may not be a good thing. If the power of the continent is balanced, we can benefit from both sides. If the Steel Ridge Kingdom is strong, they may attack the sea. List's Dragon Knight and a cheese magic shooter will change the continent's view of the sea. But the Eagle Kingdom has already become enemies with us. I'm afraid there is no way to change sides. There are only interests in a country, no friends or enemies. But I'm still inclined to become a vassal state of the Iron and Steel Ridge. I want to join hands with Sapphire to dominate the sea and completely cut off the mainland kingdom's hand on the sea. Lee William, you're too superficial. Cough, cough. Marquis Merlin coughed a few times. His body was getting weaker and weaker, but he was excited. The sea is no longer the exclusive domain of Sapphire. Ever since the Bull family rebelled and brought out sailing technology, the sea is about to usher in a new era. What era? William asked. In this era of strife, the Eagle Kingdom can see the threat of the sea, and the Iron and Steel Ridge can naturally see the convenience of the sea. The rise of the Dragon Knight and the magic shooters will accelerate the development of the sea. If this island can nurture a Dragon Knight, then it will no longer be a desolate land. But in the end, the sea is still lacking in resources. It can't accommodate too many forces. Even if they can't tolerate it, they still have to intervene. The mainland kingdom won't give the island countries the time and space to take off. Just wait and see, the future struggle on the sea will definitely not be as peaceful as the mainland. Marquis Merlin's eyes flickered with wisdom, as if he had already seen the magnificent Great Voyage era. The Taro family had always been known for their shrewdness. Back then, his father had gambled all the family's assets to fund the Grand Duke's development order, in exchange for the huge profits of Red Crab Island. He himself had been unhindered for decades, accumulated a lot of resources, and improved the family status. Unfortunately, he did not have many children. His son's talent was poor, and his grandson's talent was also average, which made him feel suffocated. However, in his grandson, he saw the glory of the Taro family's bloodline. List had inherited too many of his mother's good looks. Looking at this handsome and charming face, he could not help but think of his little daughter, Melissa, who was like the apple of his eye. List Flame, you have the ability to change the structure of the sea. In the future, the sea will inevitably set off huge waves because of you. Whether it is the Iron and Steel Ridge, Eagle Bear, or Sapphire, they will all lose to you in the end. Seize the opportunity, and the former Grand Duke's title, Master of the Sea, will belong to you. Of course, I understand this. List calmly accepted his grandfather's praise. This was the future he had planned. I just think that even if a country is to be built, I'm afraid it will not be in this sea. The expedition fleet has not yet set off, but if they find a suitable archipelago to build a country, they should be far away from the Iron and Steel Ridge and even away from Eagle Bear. Oh. This is indeed possible. Lee William and Marquis Merlin nodded at the same time. If this is the case, it is better to deceive the emissary group first, wait for the location of the country to be found, and then discuss the next step. If we can't find a suitable location at sea, we can find out if it is possible to build a country within the sphere of influence of the Iron and Steel Ridge. It is not necessary to build a country in the Iron and Steel Ridge, but we must understand the attitude and sincerity of the Iron and Steel Ridge royal family. I see. Grandfather, father, when the emissary group arrives, you will communicate with the emissary group on my behalf. Yes. Marquis Merlin nodded directly. Lee William, as List's father, naturally would not refuse. 3 days later, on December 24th, the emissary group of the Iron and Steel Ridge Kingdom, accompanied and escorted by the eldest prince, arrived at Black Horse Island. List received the emissary group on the dock. The head of the emissary group spoke in a standard steel voice and bowed gracefully. Dear Royal Highness List Tulip, Kent the Magic Elephant, the head of the Iron and Steel Ridge Kingdom's emissary group, on behalf of the only king of the Iron and Steel Ridge Kingdom, His Majesty Osborne Platinum, greets you and congratulates you on becoming a member of the Dragon Knight. At the same time, greetings to His Excellency Achilles Royd's Truth. The birth of the Archmage is a symbol of truth's reappearance in the secular world. List bowed to accept the other party's greeting. Thank you for His Majesty Osborne's greetings. On behalf of me and His Excellency Achilles Roids, I also extend our sincere greetings to His Majesty Osborne. Your Highness List, please allow me to present His Majesty's gift to you and His Excellency Achilles Roids. Kent waved his hand, and the members of the emissary group immediately came over with a large pile of gifts. With List's retainer knight, one gift at a time was delivered. They were all very expensive gifts: gems, jade, magic metals, World of Warcraft materials, and some specialties. Every time a gift was traded, a member of the emissary group would shout out the name of the gift. These valuable gifts caused many knights to gasp and marvel at the value of the gifts. List smiled and waited for the delivery of the gifts. This was the moment for the kingdom to declare its majesty and wealth, and he didn't mind the behavior of the emissary group. He just looked at the distinctive clothing style of the emissary group. With the magic elephant as his surname, Kent, the head of the emissary group, must have been born in a noble family that practiced both magic and qi, just like the Grand Duchy of Sapphire's magic goat family, which was destroyed 100 years ago. King Osborne probably heard that a Archmage was born and deliberately chose such a family. From this point, it could be seen that King Osborne was still very sincere. As for King Osborne himself, List didn't know much, but he had heard a little about him from the Sapphire Grand Duke, who said that he was a young, promising, and talented monarch. But he was not yet a dragon knight. Chapter 752. This chapter is 100,000 Years of Salted Fish. The Iron and Steel Ridge Kingdom was the strongest of the three kingdoms in the northeast corner of the legendary continent. According to the data provided by the Sapphire Grand Duke, there were 11 dragons, including 7 Dragon Knight. There were also 4 Dragon Knight in the 7 vassal kingdoms. The Grand Duchy of Sapphire's Dragon Knight, which was the Grand Duke himself, was included, but List and the Little Fire Dragon, Leo, were not included. The Eagle Kingdom had 9 dragons, including 6 Dragon Knight. Now, 1 dragon was lost, and 1 Dragon Knight was dead. However, no one knew that the Eagle Kingdom had lost a dragon, and there were still 2 Dragon Knight in the 5 vassal kingdoms. Another kingdom, the Blast Furnace Kingdom, had 8 dragons, including 5 Dragon Knight. The 4 vassal kingdoms only had 1 Dragon Knight. The Iron and Steel Ridge Kingdom was the strongest, but it did not have the strength to crush the other 2 kingdoms. The 3 kingdoms often fought with each other for hundreds of years. The emissary group was warmly received. List himself put on airs and did not communicate much with Kent the Magic Elephant. He let Marquis Merlin and Lee William communicate on his behalf. He asked Prince Anthony, "Are you familiar with the Osborne Kingdom?" Anthony recalled, "When I was young, I lived in the City of Steel for 3 years. I studied at the Royal Knight Academy and interacted with King Osborne, who was still a prince at the time. Osborne was very talented. He became a Sky Knight at the age of 17 and became a Sword Saint at the age of 19. He is now 30 years old. That is to say, he still lacks some qualifications to be a Dragon Knight candidate. For the Platinum Royal family, there is no guarantee that there will be a Dragon Knight candidate in every generation. After all the Dragon Knight candidates are rare geniuses. It is very rare for a family to have a Dragon Knight candidate. It is impossible for every generation to have a Dragon Knight candidate. This was true. Riding a dragon would not make one's genes mutate and become a Superman. In the end, it only increased the energy level of the battle energy. However, the family had been nourished by magic potions for a long period of time. Coupled with marriage with an equally outstanding bloodline, the descendants would definitely be more talented than ordinary people. However, the Dragon Knight candidate was a mutated individual that couldn't be speculated with common sense. It is said that the Iron and Steel Ridge Kingdom has existed for more than 800 years. According to the surname of the royal family, Platinum, doesn't that mean that the Platinum Dragon is about to fly back to the Dragon Valley? That's not it. Anthony explained, the white golden dragon is about 500 years old. The royal family changed their surname once after riding the white golden dragon. It's not clear why they changed their surname. The royal family basically never mentioned these things. The 500-year-old platinum dragon was 100 years older than the light emerald dragon. Does Osborne have to target the platinum dragon? Aren't there 3 other dragons that we can ride? It's probably because the platinum dragon is stronger. What is his personality like? Strong and intelligent. This is the impression I have of him. I originally thought he was a trustworthy suzerain, but the performance of the Iron and Steel Ridge royal family in the Battle of Dragon Slaying was disappointing. Anthony calmly narrated, His Majesty Osborne has grown into a qualified king. The Battle of Dragon Slaying was the arrangement of the Eagle Kingdom, but the Iron and Steel Ridge Kingdom had not sent reinforcements. Even the news that Alonso had left the border had not been sent, which had been regarded as a betrayal by the Sapphire family. Even though they did not dare to fall out with the Iron and Steel Ridge Kingdom, the estrangement was obvious. Liszt had formed a rough impression of Osborne and then asked, Did the Grand Duke have any intention of letting you bring the emissary delegation here? Father hopes that Sapphire and His Highness can form a strong offensive and defensive alliance. I probably already understand the Grand Duke's intention. After the banquet, during the lunch break, Liszt took the time to play with the gifts sent by the emissary delegation. There were a total of 20 gems of various colors, about a ton of various jades, a lot of adamantine, orichalcum, and mithril. There was also quite a lot of wine, food, and other specialties. Perhaps they knew that Liszt was a fire dragon knight. They also sent a lot of fire attribute World of Warcraft materials. Among them, there were 3 phoenix feathers. Extravagant. Feeling the surging fire attribute magic power of the phoenix feather, Liszt could not help but sigh. The kingdom was indeed a kingdom. It was only a gift for their first meeting, but it was such a big deal. As a material produced by a sub-dragon, the value of the 3 phoenix feathers combined might be comparable to the tortoise shell that Carl Law carried with him. Roar! His chest was hot. Feeling the aura of the phoenix feather, Leo suddenly became anxious. He wanted to eat the phoenix feather. The magic power of the phoenix feather is only high magic. You are so big now, do you still care about a little high magic? It is better to let me wear it at all times to help my dragon fighting practice. Roar! Leo made a suggestion. He could give one to Liszt and eat the other 2. 2 is too much. It is too wasteful to eat them. I will give you one to taste, I have use for the other 2. Liszt made a decisive decision. If he had descendants, they would most likely have fire fighting practice. Then, the phoenix feather would obviously be the best auxiliary equipment for his descendants' cultivation. Roar! Don't be in a hurry to refuse. I am currently sending people to explore the burning mountain. When the time comes, not to mention a few phoenix feathers, we can even roast the whole sub-dragon and eat it. Hearing this, Leo almost drooled. He nodded and agreed, roar. Then, Liszt separated a phoenix feather and held it in his left hand. A suction force from his palm instantly swallowed the phoenix feather's magic power. The phoenix feather turned into dust and escaped through the gaps of his fingers. Leo, who was on his chest, let out a satisfied expression and was just short of a comfortable burp. As for the remaining 2 phoenix feathers, Liszt directly put them into his spatial ring. Roar! After enjoying the delicacy of the phoenix feather, Leo could not wait to urge Liszt to go to the burning mountain as soon as possible to find the sub-dragon phoenix. Don't worry, I will find time to go there after the new year. Although Liszt, who had received the gifts, put on the airs of a dragon knight in the process of receiving the Iron and Steel Ridge Kingdom's emissary group, his words were still quite warm and polite. Of course, he did not care about the vassal state proposed by the emissary group. He directly left it to his grandfather and father to deceive. As such, 2 days passed in a flash. The emissary group, who thought that they had reached a preliminary vassal state with List, was ready to leave and follow the eldest prince back to Blue Dragon Island to celebrate the new year. Before leaving, Kent Magic Elephant made a request to List. "Your Highness List, there is a great mage in my family. She is my younger sister, Kenli Truth. Knowing that there is a truth incarnation walking in the secular world, she is very eager to follow in the footsteps of a magic shooter." He flattered Achi a lot, hoping that his sister could become Achi's disciple and learn magic from her. However, Achi rarely showed up these 2 days. Even when she did, she was very cold, making him unsure. He could only make a request to List. List pondered for a moment. "Sure, but she came to my territory to learn magic, so she must obey my rules." Chapter 753. The Guild of Magic had been established to receive mages from all over the world, so one more Kenli Truth wasn't much. Regardless of her background, she was a worker in the Flame territory. After sending off the emissaries and the eldest prince's party, there were only 4 days left before the new year. The atmosphere in the territory hadn't changed much. All trades and professions didn't have a holiday and went to work as usual. On the other hand, the castle had been very lively. Marquis Merlin, Madame Penelope, Meopel and his wife, Ulvera, and even Lytton was forced to stay by Madame Marie. No matter how much he disliked him, he was still his half-brother. Thus, List arranged for him to go to the Knight Academy to train with Sky Knight Fox. In these 4 days, List had successfully created the second move of the Fire Dragon Knight, Dragons Fighting Secret Manual, Burning the Heavens. The move was very exquisite and could release a huge attack power when practicing with Leo. The specific principle could be summed up as using the rolling of the fire dragon to swing the spear. The first move, Dragon Slash, focused on hacking, like splitting a mountain. The second move, Burning the Heavens, focused on sweeping a large area with the spear. The improvement in strength was something to be happy about, but the light green gemstone dragon was still unconscious, which made him somewhat worried. He had risked losing 1 or 2 enchanting dragon fruit to save the dragon, but it still hadn't woken up. When he rode on the dragon tooth platform, he could feel the spiritual connection, but the light green gemstone dragon didn't respond. He didn't know whether it was because the injury was too severe, or if there was a malfunction during the spiritual battle that caused it to be unable to wake up. Fortunately, the aura of the light green gemstone dragon was stable and showed no signs of exhaustion. Snow covered the Dodo Island. Apart from a circle of exposed black rocks at the crater of the volcano, the rest was covered in ice and snow. As soon as Leo arrived at the Dodo Island, he directly drilled into the magma and absorbed the condensed supreme magic. The magma of the crater was of great help to Leo's growth. However, standing at the crater and smelling the pungent smell of sulfur, List looked worried. He found that the magma area at the crater was clearly shrinking, and the temperature was much lower than before. It wasn't because of the winter snow, but because the entire volcano seemed to be in a deep slumber. "Achi, how long do you think the volcano on Dodo Island can last?" he asked the young magician beside him. There were a few snowflakes on her blue hair, making her look even more lovely. She carefully felt the distribution of magic in the crater and finally shook her head. "Brother, there's too little information, Achi can't tell." "Alright, based on my intuition, in another half a year, the volcano on Dodo Island will be extinguished. I hope my guess is wrong." He really did not wish for the volcano on Dodo Island to be extinguished. Otherwise, at that time, the amount of resources needed to maintain Leo's supreme magical potion refinement would probably be enough to overwhelm him. However, it was hard to say. The fire dragon's magic power was the source of energy. It had been maintaining the production of glass, porcelain, bricks, charcoal, and so on. Expanding the scale of the business, it was not impossible to earn enough gold coins for the fire dragon to consume potions. Down from the top of the mountain, Achi took out a broom and helped to sweep the snow on the light green sapphire dragon. List took out a canvas blanket from his spatial ring and covered the light green sapphire dragon scales that Chi had swept clean. He even built a wooden hut at the dragon's head to shelter it from the snow. In fact, with the dragon's strong physique, these efforts were useless. However, List only used this method to let the light green sapphire dragon feel his concern. Riding a dragon did not mean that one would become the dragon's master. There was still a need to continue to improve the emotional bond between the dragon and the human, and finally engrave the first-generation Dragon Knight's spiritual brand, so that it would never be forgotten. Of course, the premise of this eternal memory was not to meet someone with a fate cheat. When all the snow was swept away and the quilt was covered, the sky was already dark. List suddenly thought of something and said to himself, "I don't know how far the Eagle Kingdom's Dragon Knight Reserve plan will go. If they pretend to have no light green sapphire dragon, it will probably take more than half a year." Every day, there was a lot of news about the mainland kingdoms. The aftermath of the dragon-slaying war was calmer than expected, especially the decline of the Eagle Kingdom, which took the initiative to retreat from the border area. Instead, they reached a balance with the Blast Furnace Kingdom and joined forces to fight against the Iron and Steel Ridge Kingdom. The three countries were like the Three Kingdoms period in China, where Wu and Shu joined forces to fight against Wei. But the Eagle Kingdom should be very anxious. There are more and more Eagle ships harassing the Sapphire Caravan at sea, and the scope of harassment is getting larger and larger. It can still be maintained for the time being. My industry has not yet been spread out. Trade is mainly carried out between Sapphire, so it has not been affected much. Today's situation. Stable development was the most appropriate. List was still quite satisfied. Back at Black Horse Island, good news came. 2 new varieties of thorns were transported back from the outer island. Chapter 754. No one could match Chi's speed on the sea. On the day before the New Year's Day, List and Chi first went to Iron Hoof Island. After landing, they took Leo and went straight to Iron Hoof City to preside over the New Year's Day celebration. After the Sapphire clan took over Iron Shoe City, Advisor Gort, Administrative Officer Blair, and Commander Garcia of the Orders of Chivalry worked hard to maintain the operation of the largest city on Iron Shoe Island. The first thing to do was to check the household register and survey the farmland. Unfortunately, no traces of sprite worms were found. Before the handover, Sapphire family had plundered them cleanly. Moreover, not a single master-level craftsman could be found among the residents of the city. Obviously, they had been transferred by the Sapphire clan long ago. Other than stonemasons, carpenters, blacksmiths, cobblers, and tailors, there weren't many other types of craftsmen. Most of them were craftsmen who worked in workshops. In the end, most of the population was made up of serfs who made a living from farming. In order to ensure that these people would not starve to death, Gort and others had to buy food from the surrounding cities, and then began to arrange for the workers and serfs to work. Work in lieu of relief was an advanced governance plan brought by List. The serfs would not be given food directly, and they would only be given food if they worked. Because the farmland was going to be gradually leased out, Iron Heel City would be dominated by trade, so the serf's job was to clean up Iron Heel City. Taking advantage of this winter, he would first clean up the feces and urine, then tear down some of the empty wooden houses and build toilets. Due to the loss of a large number of people, the city, which originally had a population of 150,000, now had space for renovation. Of course, List would not invest a lot of money to renovate the city. He would simply clean up the city, build some toilets, plan the streets, and maintain the appearance of the city. You can't go back to Black Horse Island to meet your families, but I will remember your hard work. Renovating the Iron Hoof City, maintaining the population of 50,000 people is enough. The remaining 50,000 people need to be arranged for their migration. After the work is done, I will give each of you a credit. At the celebration banquet, List raised his glass and drank with his followers, saying some words that a leader used to fool his subordinates. The followers all expressed their determination to work hard and the atmosphere was joyous. The banquet was over. List rode on Leo and left the Iron Hoof City with a Qi. They returned to the sea and rode the shell back to Black Horse Island overnight. The next day, Black Horse Island entered a festive atmosphere. Most of the civilians had already taken a holiday. Even if there were civilians who worked overtime, they were paid 3 times the salary standard. Masiro and his wife arrived at noon, followed by Lee William and his wife, Levis, and Richard. Thorn's Keep was bustling with activity like never before. Before nightfall and the start of the banquet, Chrissy led the mages of the Guild of Magic to the square in front of the Thorn Fort and set off many magical fireworks. This was a research task issued by List in the Guild of Magic, and it was not difficult in itself. That was why there was such a fireworks display. When he spent the New Year's Day in the Long Taro Castle, the court great magician Gramandan, Truth released magic fireworks in the Long Taro Castle. This left a deep impression on him. If there were no fireworks, would it still be called a New Year festival? So beautiful. How lively. So happy. Looking at the magical fireworks blooming in the air, everyone's expression flickered with colorful light, constantly changing with the fireworks. It's been 3 years. List muttered silently in his heart. This was the 3rd New Year's Day he had spent in this world. Every festive season, he missed his family, but he had no relatives to miss, so he quickly shook off this trace of melancholy. In any case, he was already a part of this world. I asked someone to send a potted plant from the castle as a New Year's Day gift for you. As long as you treat it well, it will repay you, just like the stone flowers of the Thorn Fort. Madame Penelope came over, took his hand, and chattered. All over Bramble Castle, potted plants of stone flowers were placed as decorations for the castle. After knowing that the stone flower cordyceps were bred from the potted plants she sent, Madame Penelope became more and more convinced that her potted plants were different. Now, she was sometimes reluctant to send potted plants as gifts. She only gave them generously to List and other family members. However, after the stone flower, she had sent out more than 100 potted plants, yet not a single cordyceps had been found. List had received 10 potted plants in total, yet none of them had produced sprite worms. However, he still accepted Madame Penelope's kindness. Rest assured, grandmother. I have specially placed the potted plants you sent on the balcony to take good care of them, so as to prevent them from producing sprite worms one day. That's right, that's how it should be. The noisy New Year's Day subsided in the middle of the night. List returned to his bedroom, drank a cup of milk tea, operated his dragon's battle chi to evaporate the alcohol in his body, and restored his mind's clarity. Next, he opened a night novel and waited for the New Year's Day to come. After a moment, the castle's bell rang. Sapphire calendar year 153 had passed, and 154 had arrived. The smoke mission also quietly changed at this time. Mission completed. Reward, Magic Communication Array Plan. When the smoke slowly outlined the unknown reward serpentines, List's spirit was suddenly roused. It turned out to be a Magic Communication Array Plan. The value of this reward could be said to be not much less than that of a dragon. Because once the Magic Communication Array was popularized, the benefits that could be generated would be unimaginably huge. It was similar to the invention of the telegraph or the telephone on Earth, bringing about a subversive change in society. Very good. I appreciate this mission reward. As for the Magic Communication Array Plan, it is either with a chi or with the Wizard Tower. Tomorrow, I will ask carefully to see who invented the Magic Communication Array Plan. List was in a good mood. After taking several deep breaths, he restrained his emotions and began to check the new smoke mission. Mission: a new year will begin with the arrival of the Age of Navigation. It is time for the exploration fleet to set off to explore the sea. Keep in touch at all times. Have Yevich lead the fleet out to sea to find new islands for you to live on. Please find 3 islands outside of Sapphire's sphere of influence. Reward, the agitation of the rubber sprite worm triplets. The rubber sprite worm triplets are agitating again? It seems that after I recently shifted my attention back to the elves, I have continuously issued elf-related missions. It seems that the smoke dragon's power of fate is starting to swindle the elves. List pondered over the contents of the mission. Yevich's exploration fleet can set off, but before that, I have to first create the magic communication array so that I can keep track of the fleet's movements. Every time Yevich finds an island, a chi and I will be able to arrive in time and arrange for people to develop it. Moreover, he and a chi could also replenish the fleet's supplies at any time. In fact, a chi was the best candidate to explore the archipelago. However, a chi's energy was devoted to magic experiments. As an high wizard, it seemed a bit wasteful for her to search for islands in the vast sea. After all, there were so many important mysteries waiting for a chi to explore. As his thoughts drifted, List fell asleep. Chapter 755. A chi had not been researching the communication magic circle recently, so List left a chi's lab to ask the mage tower if the mages from the Guild of Magic had come up with a solution. But before he could ask, Chris had already arrived at Thorn Castle. "Chris, you're here so early today?" Usually, Chris would come to Thorn Castle in the afternoon to be a chi's assistant in magic experiments and ask about magic. She now considered herself as a chi's student and was about to become a chi's lackey. Of course, any mage would be happy to become a magic shooter's lackey. "Your Highness, there's some progress in the Guild of Magic's experimental project. I'm about to report it to His Excellency List." Facing List, Chris was equally respectful. She was willing to be a magic shooter's lackey, but she was also willing to be a dragon knight's lackey. Anyway, in the fire territory, magic shooters and dragon knight were one family, so there was no need to distinguish who was the lackey. "Oh, what's the progress?" "There's some progress in the communication magic circle proposed by Your Highness. We've successfully drawn a magic circle that can trigger mana retroaction from a distance, but we're still far from the communication stage." Just as he was about to look for it, the solution came knocking on his door. List was overjoyed. "Tell me more. Let's go to a chi's lab first." "Let's go." Returning to the lab, Chris carefully explained the results of their experiment. Generally speaking, some kind of magic circle could trigger mana retroaction. For example, releasing fire magic into a magic circle would trigger the activation of fire magic, but the activation was irregular. They could not use magic to form serpentines to transmit information. The magic circle here formed a word with runes, but the magic circle on the other side would still be agitated and would not form the same word. The mages from the Guild of Magic could not solve this problem, so they were ready to report it to a chi. However, List's eyes lit up. "Chris, does this magic circle only correspond to the same type of magic? For example, fire magic can only correspond to fire magic, and water magic can only correspond to water magic?" "Yes, Your Highness. If that's the case, it's very easy to solve." "Ah, Your Highness, is there any way to solve this problem?" Chris was very surprised. Although she knew that List was very knowledgeable in magic theory, there was a big difference between theory and practice, especially when it came to magic arrays. A chi also looked at List curiously, but she wasn't surprised. In her heart, List was the most erudite scholar in the world, full of vast wisdom. Most of her knowledge was imparted to her by List, and it was also thanks to List's teachings that she could come into contact with the weave and become a magic shooter. If List were to become a mage, he would become a magic shooter sooner or later. List smiled. After pondering for a moment, he slowly said, "It's actually very simple. There are 8 types of magic power: water, fire, earth, wind, lightning, ice, and darkness. Since each type of magic power can only interact with magic power of the same type, we can create an octal coding program based on the 8 types of magic power. Octal coding program? Let's use fire magic power to represent 0, water magic power to represent 1, and so on. Let's use dark magic power to represent 7. This way, every octal can be converted to 1, and our language can be converted into 8 numeric expressions from 0 to 7 according to this octal code. Can it be expressed like this? Achi and Chris were a little confused. Humans naturally used decimal systems because a pair of hands had 10 fingers, and counting to 10 would increase one digit. However, there were only 8 types of magic power, so there was no way to use decimal systems and could only be converted to octal systems. Of course. Liszt suggested again, in fact, octal systems are still too cumbersome. After all, the 4 types of magic power are very rare, and many ordinary mages will not practice these attributes. I personally think it's more practical to use binary coding. The two continue to be confused. Binary? Fire magic power represents 0, water magic power represents 1, and binary can be expressed smoothly. For example, 1 in binary is 1 streak of water magic power, 2 is 1 streak of water magic power and 1 streak of fire magic power, 3 is 2 streaks of water magic power, 4 is 1 streak of water magic power, 2 streaks of fire magic power. After listening to Liszt's tongue-twister-like narration, Chris continued to be confused and confused. But Achi listened in fascination and quickly understood. So as long as there is a constant combination of 0 and 1, any information can be expressed? Yes. Brother, Achi seems to have understood that as long as the runes of the magic array are used to control it, the mana retroaction can be quickly transmitted. This way, there is no need to achieve the same magic activity on both sides of the magic array, as long as the order of the feedback attributes is correct. Yes, that's it. I have already told you the specific coding method. Next, Achi, you will take the lead and make binary coding serpentines. First, make simple, commonly used text coding, as long as it can be used. I plan to put it on the expedition fleet. Then let the mages of the Guild of Magic slowly code it. While Achi led the mages of the Guild of Magic to digest octal and binary coding, Liszt himself was also deep in thought. He had a sudden inspiration. If the magic array could be expressed in binary, and if it was a little more complicated, could it be transformed into a calculator, or even evolved into a computer? Perhaps due to the limitations of materials, it could not be popularized into a home magic computer, but it was not impossible to make it into a supercomputer. Is there such a possibility? Maybe not, or maybe there is. But even if a computer could be made, the difficulty would be immense. There were too many theories involved, especially the logic of some hardware, which could not be figured out in a short period of time. Even if mages were smart people, they would still be confused when they were suddenly exposed to a whole new system. If there is time, I can talk to Achi about this idea. The rest depends on whether the mages are willing to study it or not. Anyway, I don't have time to make a computer. Having tasted the thrill of riding a dragon, Liszt had long been immersed in power and could not extricate himself. He no longer cared so much about the Industrial Revolution or the scientific and technological revolution. Living in such a fantasy world and exploring the secrets of the entire world was far more interesting than developing science and technology. The smoke mission during the New Year's Day was a good expression of his wishes. The world is big, and there are still many wonderful things that have not been experienced. Whether it is the sea or the continent, they are all waiting for you to explore. After the New Year's Day. After sending off Marquis Merlin's family, and then Marquis Oxtail's family. Even Madame Penelope and Elvira left Thorn Castle. They had not returned to their castle for a long time, and there were too many accumulated things waiting to be dealt with. The noisy and lively atmosphere of Thorn Castle suddenly became cold and cheerless. However, Liszt did not reveal any "all good things must come to an end" melancholy, because he had more important things to deal with. Merry Dawn Daybreak had returned from the Eagle Kingdom and brought news of the Fire Mountain Wyvern Phoenix. There was indeed a fire mountain in a wilderness of the Eagle Kingdom, and there were indeed local residents who had heard of the Wyvern Phoenix. They had also seen a great noble lord leading orders of chivalry to the Fire Mountain to capture the Wyvern Phoenix, but in the end, more than half of the orders of chivalry returned without success. Not only did they not find the Phoenix, but they were also almost wiped out by World of Warcraft in the forest. Achi, make a coded communication magic circle as soon as possible. We will test the limit of the communication magic circle and the strength of the long-distance transmission signal on the way. Chapter 756. This chapter is Quetks. Thank you very much. As more and more mages gathered in the Guild of Magic, an experimental team could recruit many mages to participate, greatly increasing the speed. However, the communication magic array was highly confidential, and only a few trusted mages could participate in the core production. The binary and octal codes were something that only Achi and Chris had mastered. After all, the communication magic array could be used not only for civilian use but also for military use. Once it was mastered by foreign countries, such as the Eagle Kingdom, the Dragon Knight could support any border war at any time, completely eliminating the need for manual communication. Your Highness, these are the current 4 core machines. Chris reported the progress to List every day. 2 of the core machines were in the shape of a square box. When the lid was opened, there was a complex magic structure inside. It was similar to a 3-dimensional compass, with a total of 8 layers superimposed on top and bottom, each layer inlaid with a different kind of crystal. Using the magic sensitivity of the crystal, the magic attribute was transmitted. This was the octal core machine. According to the mechanical reaction of the compass, a set of information could be encoded for interaction. However, the code needed to be manually entered, sending a magic fax like sending a telegram. Next to the 2 core machines, there were 2 flatter boxes, which also had a structure similar to the compass, but only 2 layers. This was the binary core machine, and the principle was similar to the octal core machine. It might be easier to operate, but because the octal code was long, the speed of message delivery was slow. List personally operated 1 core machine according to the code and communicated with the other core machine. It was really troublesome, a bit like an old-fashioned rotary dial telephone. After dialing a code, you had to wait for the compass to reset and then dial the next code. Just a simple hello on the binary core machine, List wasted a minute. If it was a sentence, it would take half an hour. I think you still have to work on the convenience aspect. For example, you can design a transmission lever on the compass and then make an external keyboard. Once you touch the keyboard button, you can directly set a code position on the compass. This will definitely greatly improve the efficiency. It had to be said that List, who came from the computer age, had a shining light of civilization in every idea. It made Achi and Chris feel as if the clouds had been dispelled, and they saw a vast new world. Your Highness, I will immediately start improving the core machine, Chris said impatiently. Don't be too anxious. You must keep this a secret. Also, Achi and I are going on a long trip, so we can test the effects of these 2 core computers. Chris said, in that case, Your Highness, please give the communication magic circle a more secular name. As for the name, let's call it the Remote Wireless Mana Messenger Desktop, or simply the Wireless Magic Station, List said casually. He was imitating a radio station. The full name of a radio station was a radio station, and it used electromagnetic signals. What was used here was magic signals, so it could be called a wireless magic station or a magic station. The name was thus decided. List and Achi were also preparing to set off for the burning mountain of the Eagle Kingdom to search for the draconic phoenix and verify the transmission distance of the magic platform. On the sea, the white shell rode the wind and waves, and List was holding the binary core machine of the wireless magic station and constantly fiddling with the compass. At the same time, the compass would constantly rotate and give back information. Achi was fiddling with the octal core machine of the magic station. Brother, the current distance is about 800 kilometers, and the signal transmission is still stable without any signs of weakening. It can be guessed that the distribution of the magic network is very wide, and long-distance communication is not obstructed. How is the response speed on your side? There is no change in the response speed. The signal transmission speed has nothing to do with the distance. Well, it seems that the magic network is really wonderful. Liszt exclaimed. The transmission speed of the magic network might be similar to the transmission speed of electromagnetic waves, slightly less than the speed of light. According to previous guesses, the magic network was a kind of field, and electromagnetic waves were also a kind of field. Although one was on the physical level and the other was on the magic level, the principles were still similar. However, there was one difference. Electromagnetic waves were consumed, and the farther the distance, the more serious the consumption. However, the magic network did not seem to have such a phenomenon of consumption. It was already 800 kilometers away, and the signal quality of the magic network was still stable. But thinking about it carefully, it was normal. According to the legends, during the era of the Moon Empire, the mages who ruled the world could build teleportation arrays to go to the moon. With the help of the magic network, even planet teleportation could be achieved, let alone a few messages. In a flash, they arrived at a coastline in the Eagle Kingdom. There was no one on the shore. Putting away the shell, Liszt summoned the little fire dragon Leo, who carried the two people and two magic stations high up into the clouds. With the cover of the clouds, they began to fly in the direction of the burning mountain. The blood servant had drawn a map, and the general direction could be determined. However, even with the directions of the map, the two of them still flew in the sky and landed on the ground, asking the local people about the geographical location. It took them a full 3 days to arrive at the wild forest where the burning mountain was. The forest was called the Afterglow Field, and it was the fief of a marquis. However, Liszt did not have any intention of interacting with this marquis. After finding the general area of the mark of the blood servant, he quickly contacted the vampire stationed there through his heart. Then, under the guidance of the vampire, they arrived at the burning mountain where the sky dragon and phoenix were said to reside. After sending the vampire away, Liszt and a Chi directly searched in the forest. A dragon knight and a magic shooter did not need to worry about the dangers of the forest. In case they encountered an evil dragon, they could just beat it up and ride it. Casting magic eyes, Liszt constantly looked for any signs of mana feedback. It's a pity that I can't bring Loki, otherwise I could ride Loki and run in the forest as much as I want. Without Loki as a mount, and Leo was not suitable for riding in the forest, he could only carry a Chi and fly, aimlessly looking for the possible habitat of the sky dragon and phoenix. This search lasted for 5 days. They did not find the sky dragon and phoenix, but they hunted a lot of them in World of Warcraft. Most of them were sprinkled with seasoning and barbecued for Leo to eat. They even encountered 2 high-level World of Warcraft, and then slaughtered and dismembered them. The meat and materials were stored in Liszt's space ring. During this time, they successfully tamed an intermediate World of Warcraft as a mount. It was a split-legged lizard, an intermediate World of Warcraft of the Earth attribute. It looked a bit ugly, but it was suitable for riding, especially since it had a relatively gentle temperament. After Liszt released Dragon's Might, the World of Warcraft immediately obediently let him drive it. It was not slow, and it was able to move freely in the forest. After returning, I will give the split-legged lizard to the ox-tailed marquis. He lacks a mount. Liszt thought, the split-legged lizard's back was wider than that of an elephant. It would not be a problem for a large basket to carry a group of people. It was very suitable for the marquis family to go on a road trip. In addition to World of Warcraft, a Chi collected a large number of plant samples in the forest, waiting to go back and cultivate them. Liszt, with the help of magic eyes, also accidentally discovered 2 sprite worms. One was a Nepenthes sprite worm, a plant that could catch insects. Its value was similar to that of the Venus flytrap sprite worm that Liszt previously owned. They were both ornamental plants. The other was a sprite worm whose name was unknown. Its worm stalk was a small red tree with fiery red leaves and fiery red fruits. From a distance, it looked like clusters of torches. The fruits were edible, but they tasted ordinary. Judging from the plant's magic power attribute, it is a worm stalk of the fire attribute. Let's call it the torch tree. List quickly named the plant, a chi. Do you think the torch tree is related to the sky dragon and phoenix? There are a lot of torch trees in the vicinity. Although they are not magic ingredients, they look like burning flames. Chapter 757. This chapter is Immortal Dream Traversing. The Burning Mountain was a continuous mountain range. The mountainous area might exceed the area of Coral Island, and it was difficult to see the full picture of the forest. After not finding any traces of the inferior dragon phoenix for 5 days in a row, List could not bear to waste time here. He resolutely decided to ride Leo and use Dragon Eye Trail to carefully search every corner of the forest. Perhaps riding the dragon would expose his traces, but he was confident that no one could stop him. List's mentality was very inflated. He always felt that even if he rode a dragon and flew from the capital of the Eagle Kingdom, no one would dare to stop him. He was so confident and free. After riding the Dragon Eye Trail was opened, and the forest of the Burning Mountain suddenly appeared in his field of vision. Countless rays of mana retroaction flickered in his field of vision, most of which were World of Warcraft's radiances. The Savage Forest had always been the home of World of Warcraft. Skipping over these World of Warcraft, List mainly looked at 2 kinds of mana retroactions. One was the mana retroaction of plants. Any plant that glowed was undoubtedly a worm stalk or a magic ingredient, but there was bound to be a worm stalk around the magic ingredient. The other was the bright mana retroaction, which meant that it was either Advanced Warcraft or Super Warcraft, or even the inferior dragon phoenix he was looking for. Oh, there is a big tree glowing there. List's eyes lit up. List flapped his wings and rushed to the big tree. The big tree was the chaotic magic radiance. When List arrived, he suddenly discovered that it was a rock tree. Rock and stone trees were relatively common ironwood woods in the legendary continent, but the awkward thing was that trees grew slowly. After some rock and stone tree worm stalks gave birth to sprite worms, the sprite worm only had a lifespan of 10 years, and the time period it could influence was only 10 years. However, rock and stone trees had a growth period of hundreds of years, and the effect of the worm stalks was almost zero. It shouldn't be a stonewood sprite worm, right? He carefully looked around and found a shivering sprite hiding on a tree branch. The sprite was pale yellow and had a small, slender wooden stick on its head. Jumping down from the dragon's back, List didn't even bother with the process of hooking up with the jade powder. He directly stretched out his finger and let the little elf, who was suppressed by the dragon's might and did not dare to move, bite him. The contract was successful in an instant, so Leo also retracted his firebird. The little sprite returned to its normal liveliness and tilted its head to look at List. Bugu? Put away the cordyceps and come with me. I'll take you to a place with a lot of jade powder. List took out a small bag of jade powder and handed it to the stonewood sprite. The deliciousness of the jade powder attracted the stonewood fairy. After chewing on it a few times, she accepted List. It opened its mouth and inhaled, and the 50-meter-tall rock tree rapidly shrank down into a seed that flew into the little rock fairy's mouth. A deep pit was left on the ground. Boo-goo. Very well, let's go. List passed the stonewood sprite to a chi. He should be happy that he picked up a little sprite for free, but he was actually not very happy. The value of the stonewood sprite was indeed a little low, mainly because it took a long time for the stonewood to grow. Little sprites could only live for 100 years, and the density of the stonewood was very low. Their numbers and production were severely limited, so it was difficult for the sprites to fully utilize their farming ability. Basically, the stone wood and other iron wood used by humans were cut from the primeval forest and not planted artificially. However, picking up a little sprite was better than not picking it up at all. It was worth it to be able to affect the growth of a few stonewood trees. List quickly adjusted his emotions. I found a little sprite when I was searching on the dragon just now. I feel like I can ride Leo around the forest every day and make a living by picking up little sprites. Achi giggled. But brother, forest sprites are not that valuable. Only those bred by artificially tamed plants are valuable. Okay, that's true. Elves bred by artificially tamed plants were far more valuable than wild elves. The reason was that artificially tamed plants were mostly high-value crops such as potions, grains, fruit trees, vegetables, and raw materials. Thus, the added value of the sprite's soared. Most of the plants in the forest were untamed plants. Even if there were sprites, they could not make much of an impact. For example, any sprite of wildflowers, even if there was a big sprite, could only grow more wildflowers at most. When the wildflowers could not be converted into money, the sprites naturally lost their value. Unless a mutated potion was found, the value of the sprites would skyrocket instantly. At present, most of the common sprites in the elven market were sold together with potion seeds. So invisibly, the stonewood sprite became synonymous with low price. Once again, he was one with the dragon. List continued to look for traces of the draconic phoenix. After half a day, when he went around a mountain, a flame suddenly appeared in his field of vision. Huh! He suddenly widened his eyes and saw clearly that halfway up a mountain in the distance, there was a big tree that did not stand out. The whole tree was shining like a flame, which was the light of mana retroaction. A fire elemental tree. Cordyceps. Leo fell and quickly approached the flame-like tree. At this time, the dragon eye's vision was filled with different scenery. Among the colorful flames of the tree, there were 3 scarlet spots gathered together, which were particularly bright. Could it be elven triplets again? Such a thought suddenly flashed in his mind. He had already ridden Leo into the forest. When he was about to brush the canopy, List suddenly jumped down and jumped to the position of the 3 bright red spots. When he got closer, he realized that it was not a triplet sprite, but a bird's nest. There were 3 eggs lying quietly in the bird's nest. The eggs were covered with red lines and were as big as an ostrich's egg. Magic eye was still open, and he could see that there was an extremely rich fire elemental magic in the eggs. Judging from the color of the magic, it was not low magic, but high magic. In an instant, List understood the identity of the eggs, phoenix eggs. Only the lesser dragon phoenix had such a strong fire elemental high magic. He did not know where the lesser dragon phoenix was, but these 3 eggs and this bird's nest must be a place that the lesser dragon phoenix would not abandon. Guarding this place, the lesser dragon phoenix would also become List's. He snapped his fingers. Leo flew over again with Achi on his back. Achi jumped to the ground, and Leo turned into a flame and rushed into List's chest. Achi, the lesser dragon phoenix's nest and eggs have been found. We will wait here for the lesser dragon phoenix to come. Yeah. Roar. Leo, in his magic form, let out an eager cry. He wanted to eat the phoenix eggs and said that this was what List said in advance. Don't be impatient, phoenix eggs are used for fishing. Fishing, do you understand? We want to catch the lesser dragon phoenix. Roar. Leo calmed down. Chapter 758. The phoenix egg attracted most of List's attention, but the tree where the phoenix nest was still worthy of List's careful observation. This is a worm stalk. He could easily tell. However, the sprite of the worm stalk was nowhere to be found. List circled around the tree and did not find any sprite with the same attribute as the worm stalk. Where did this sprite go? It shouldn't have been eaten, and the worm stalk did not lose its magic. This phoenix nest should have existed for a long time. Could it be that the sprite was scared away by the flood dragon phoenix and did not dare to return? This was still a possibility. Thus, he did not go far. After circling around, he returned to the fire worm stalk tree and lay dormant. Achi, have you found out what species this tree is? There are no records of similar species in the books, brother. Achi plucked a few leaves and shook her head. List also plucked a few leaves to study. The leaves were 5-pointed stars, and the outline was a bit like maple leaves, but the edges were very round, completely different from maple trees. The entire tree was about 30 meters tall. The trunk was straight, the branches were also relatively round, and the bark was very smooth. The shape was very unique. This was the first time that List had seen a tree with this style. If it's not a maple tree, could it be a parasol tree? No, parasol trees don't look like this. The phoenix, or the phoenix, was related to the legend of World of Warcraft, which liked to rest on parasol trees. When it died, it would turn into ashes and resurrect. Unfortunately, the legend was just a legend. The 3 eggs were very good proof that even the super dragon type World of Warcraft was still just World of Warcraft. Even the fire dragon had to spend a lot of effort and could only be resurrected with List's help. How could a flood dragon casually resurrect and not die? Moreover, from the Steel Ridge Kingdom's emissary group, it could be concluded that this flood dragon was not rare. There were some in the Eagle Kingdom, and there were definitely some in the Steel Ridge Kingdom. Not knowing the details, he let Achi continue to study the tree while he observed the surroundings, waiting for the flood dragon phoenix to come and devising tactics. The dragon knight was very powerful, but he could not guarantee the flood dragon phoenix's speed. If it was too fast, it would be very difficult to catch. They waited until the sky turned dark. List was not anxious at all. The birds would eventually return to their nests to hatch their eggs. That was indeed the case. When night fell, apart from a few sounds of unknown animals, the forest on Fire Mountain gradually quietened down. At this moment, List's magic eyes suddenly discovered a fiery red mana moving quickly in the distance. The magic power formed the shape of a large bird. Achi, be careful, the phoenix is back. List unsheathed the Ice Soul Dragon slaying sword and quickly entered battle mode, concealing his aura. Achi immediately hid herself, ready to communicate with the weave and cast magic. Brother, Achi's water ring rend is ready. Listen to my password. The strategy was simple. Achi would release the water ring tear spell to contain the phoenix, while List would go up and break the phoenix's 2 wings. Then, all that was left was to avoid the phoenix's magic and capture it. If its resistance was too strong, they would summon Leo to suppress it. In short, it was just a big bird in World of Warcraft. There was no need for too much elaborate planning. The phoenix quickly flew back, but when it was about to approach the tree, it suddenly turned around and circled around the tree in List's field of vision, letting out a loud, sonorous cry. It kept circling, but did not land in the direction of the bird's nest. Obviously, it had discovered the intruder. I still exposed my aura and was discovered by the phoenix. List felt it was a pity, but he did not slow down. He shouted, Achi, do it. Boom! The magic was instantly cast, and a huge water ring appeared out of thin air, entangling the circling phoenix. Screech! The phoenix screamed and struggled. List quickly pounced and rushed into the air like lightning. The magic eye's vision was locked on the phoenix's position, and he swung the Ice Soul Dragon slaying sword at the phoenix's struggling wings. Bang! The phoenix's wings were broken by List's explosive attack. Its body tilted, and it could no longer maintain its balance, falling down. With a boom, it hit the ground. After it landed, it opened its mouth and released magic. A violent circle of fire magic spread, instantly shattering the water ring. But after breaking free, it did not get a chance to breathe. List's attack had already smashed down like a storm. The elephant-like phoenix was directly stepped on by List, and then the Ice Soul dragon-slaying sword aimed at the other intact wing and smashed it, successfully breaking the bone. In just a face-to-face confrontation, the phoenix's wings were broken. It let out a tragic cry, and then its body rippled with a new circle of fire magic, similar to the advanced fire magic resistance ring of fire, but obviously more powerful. List stirred up his dragon's fighting spirit, and also met the attack with his fire fighting spirit, counteracting the impact of the magic. A Chi's second magic came in time, and once again bound the phoenix. Taking advantage of this gap, List quickly took out the orichalcum shackles. First, one of the phoenix's feet was shackled, then the other. He pulled the bolt spring of the shackles, and the orichalcum shackles quickly closed, tightly locking the phoenix's slender feet. The other shackle was successfully locked on the phoenix's neck, and the other end was locked on the phoenix's mouth. After the shackles were closed, the phoenix could not even release magic. It stirred up all the magic in its body, but it could only turn into burning flames. Its magic was also of a high magic level, but what List was least afraid of was fire fighting spirit. Bearing the flames, he forcibly tied the two sets of shackles together. At this point, the phoenix was completely bound and could not move. Although it took some effort, it did not take much time, and the strength of the phoenix was not too strong. It was slightly more difficult than capturing Marquis Wildtao, mainly relying on the advantage of its body. To be precise, its fighting strength was about the level of a domain knight. It's quite easy. Leo, stop shouting, you can eat phoenix meat sooner or later. List clapped his hands, and at the same time comforted Leo, who always wanted to come out and eat meat. How could he let Leo eat it before he studied the drakes and phoenixes? But at this moment, Leo suddenly reminded him that a new phoenix was approaching at high speed, and List almost instinctively jumped on the spot. And just as he jumped away, an even larger phoenix flapped its wings and swooped down, leaving scorch marks on the place where he had just been standing. There's actually another one. Good timing, one barbecued, one boiled. List already knew the power of the phoenix, so he did not panic at all. After signaling a Chi to release magic to restrain it, he flashed and moved several times to attack, breaking the phoenix's wings and throwing it to the ground. Then he took out more shackles and did the same to the new phoenix. After the Iron and Steel Ridge Kingdom's emissary group arrived and learned that there was orichalcum among the gifts, he immediately asked the Iron Knight Alvin Eagle's word to make several sets of orichalcum shackles. They were left to capture the phoenix. Orichalcum was an indestructible magic metal, widely used to make locks. It could be used to lock a knight, but it was more commonly used to lock World of Warcraft. After locking World of Warcraft, it was difficult to open it without external force. Roar! Seeing that the battle was over, Leo could not wait to come out and eat meat again in his heart. Wait a little longer, we haven't barbecued yet, I don't want to see you continue to eat raw meat. If you want to eat, eat cooked food, understand? Roar! Chapter 759. The two phoenixes, which were as big as elephants, were both tied to the ground. List had time to carefully look at the phoenixes, which were known as subdragons. The subdragon was a super dragon species in World of Warcraft. In theory, it was a powerful creature second only to dragons. However, List felt that they did have some strength, but to say that they were second only to dragons, he was afraid that he underestimated the gap between World of Warcraft and dragons. The gap was so big that it was like the gap between an ordinary knight and a dragon knight, or a natural moat. No wonder there were great noble lords who were not dragon knight, but also wanted to enter the mountain to catch the phoenixes. It seemed that these great nobles understood the subdragon species in World of Warcraft. They knew that the subdragon's strength was limited and belonged to the catchable sequence. However, the subdragon could be called a creature second only to dragons, which was somewhat magical. Their magic belonged to the high magic level, which was very rare. After all, even a magic shooter like Qi only belonged to the high magic level. Only the magic of dragons belonged to the supreme magic level. The outline of the body is similar to a pheasant, the feathers are red and yellow, and the body's most magical place is the 7 feathers behind the tail. Each tail feather is about 3.5 meters long, and the color is close to fiery red, darker than the feathers on the body. He was introducing, and Qi was recording. Unfortunately, there was no camera, otherwise it would be more accurate to take pictures and record directly. Now he could only record these magical creatures through the method of words and drawings. There is no legendary phoenix crown on the head, only a tuft of raised feathers, not too magical. The eyes are very bright, the magic is also abundant, the beak is sharp, curved. In general, this is a luxurious enhanced version of a pheasant. Now I will pull out a tail feather to observe. He grabbed a tail feather of the phoenix and pulled it out of the phoenixes but with both hands. However, the strange thing was that when the tail feather was separated from the body of the phoenix, it shrank rapidly. Almost in the blink of an eye, it shrank into a fiery red gem-like feather of 20 centimeters long. This, the phoenix feathers sent by Marquis Merlin and the emissary group are all like this. He handed the feather directly to Qi, and took out 2 more from his spatial ring. Take a look, isn't it very strange? I have 2 exactly the same phoenix feather in my spatial ring. It's really amazing, Qi can feel the strength of the phoenix's magic condensed between the feathers. Let's try again. As Liszt spoke, he plucked another phoenix's tail feather and carefully observed it with magic eyes, looking for the most detailed changes. It was a strange change, a series of changes on the microscopic level caused by the fire element magic. But the vision of magic eyes was not detailed enough. Liszt directly handed the phoenix feather to Qi. Hold it first. Once I enter Dragon Rider mode and activate Dragon Eye Track, you can pull out a new phoenix feather and let me carefully observe it. Yes. There was a call. Leo made his grand entrance. The moment the fire dragon's burning flames appeared, it instantly suppressed the phoenix flames that were still burning the ground. The phoenix flames shrank back into its body, not even daring to emit smoke. Roar! As soon as Leo landed, he wanted to eat the phoenix. However, Liszt got on top of her and stopped her in time. Don't be impatient. This pair of phoenixes was obviously a male and a female. Perhaps if they were captured and tamed, they could breed a large number of new phoenixes in the future. It would be too much of a waste to eat them. Besides, he didn't want Leo to be controlled by his desires. Only Liszt could control him. Dragon Eye Track was used. Qi quickly controlled the water and pulled out a phoenix tail feather. The instantaneous changes were all reflected in the vision of Dragon Eye Track. The tiniest magic particles were all exposed in the field of vision. The reorganization and changes between the particles had an inexplicable pattern. Liszt was deeply immersed in it, but he couldn't grasp that trace of inspiration. Qi, pull another one. A moment later. Pull another one. Pull another one. Pull another one. Keep pulling. Don't stop. Pull another one. Qi helplessly spread her hands. Brother, the tail feathers of the 2 phoenixes have been stripped, there are no tail feathers to pull. Liszt was not done yet. Pull the feathers from the wings again, let me see if there are the same changes in nature as the tail feathers. The phoenix with a large bald but looked resentfully at the 2 people and the dragon, unable to resist the humiliation of having its feathers plucked. However, after the wing feathers were pulled out, there was no change in nature, and they were still 1 meter long feathers. Not only did the wing feathers not change, but the feathers on the back, head, belly, and other parts also did not change. Only the 7 tail feathers had a different change in nature. Looking at the miserable appearance of the phoenix with many feathers pulled out, and then looking at the 16 phoenix feathers in Qi's hands, Liszt shook his head. Just a little more inspiration, and I can capture the change in the nature of the phoenix feathers. Forget it, I'll record the information first, and then study it slowly. Roar. Leo roared impatiently. He wanted to eat phoenix meat. Huh. List continued to stare at the phoenix, and he found that the phoenix's aura began to slowly decline. This was not because of injury, but because the tail feathers were pulled out, leading to the decline of their vitality. In the next 10 minutes, no matter how List and Achi treated the two phoenixes, their auras still declined little by little, and they finally died. Only 2 phoenix corpses were left, still full of magic. Although it was a pity that he could not tame the phoenix and embark on the path of sustainable development, List still carefully cleaned up the phoenix corpses. According to the intensity of the magic, the phoenix's eyes, beak, claws, and feathers were all removed in turn. The rest of the meat was intended to be put into the space ring, but it was suddenly bitten by Leo. Then he flew to the side and gorged on it. List was furious. Presumptuous. Achi dissuaded, brother, let Leo eat some meat, he is still in the development stage. If you didn't stop me, I would have beaten him up today. List complained and quickly put the other phoenix corpse into the space ring to prevent it from being taken away by Leo again. The phoenix specimen will be studied when we get back. What about the 3 phoenix eggs on the tree? The phoenix was dead, and the phoenix eggs had no female phoenix to incubate. If they wanted to continue incubating, they would probably have to carry out artificial intervention. The bird egg hatching technology of Black Horse Island was not bad. Flamingo eggs and green-headed duck eggs could be hatched artificially. However, the hatching of bird eggs required strict standards, and the bird eggs in the territory were only mastered after many attempts. Forget it, I'll put it away first, and then I'll find a way to hatch it artificially when I get back. List simply removed the bird nest from the tree and put it into the space ring. Before the bird egg hatches, it can be put into the gem space without destroying the activity of the bird egg. The reason is either that the unhatched bird egg has not yet developed a soul, or the bird egg can resist the soul destruction of the gem space. In short, the space ring is harmless to the bird egg. As soon as the bird nest was put in, Leo, who was not far away, suddenly let out a low roar. He turned his head and stared in a certain direction in the darkness. List felt it and used his magic eyes to look in the direction Leo was staring at. Chapter 760. A Great Elf. The elf born from the cordyceps tree full of fire magic, the elf that had been scared away by the phoenix, had returned, and it was a great elf. Instantly, there was the excitement of double happiness. Leo, be quiet. Afraid of scaring the great elf, List could not help but whisper. Hearing this, Leo lowered his head and continued to eat his phoenix meat. And the great elf hid behind a tree trunk not far away, looking in Leo's direction. As List slowly approached, it retreated for a distance, maintaining at least 30 meters away from List. It tried to hide its figure, but the bright magic was as dazzling as a light bulb. I have jade powder. List grabbed a handful of jade powder and threw it into the air. The fragrance of the jade powder immediately made the great elf's body tremble, and it involuntarily flew over, wanting to eat some jade powder. The more it ate, the happier it became. After picking up the scattered jade powder and eating it, the great elf looked at List's palm, which had a large amount of fragrant jade powder emitting the aura of magic. Gulp. The great elf seemed to swallow its saliva as it inched closer to List, flapping its wings. Soon, it was 3 meters away from List. A pair of large eyes curiously sized up List, but it did not go any closer. It restrained its desire, remaining vigilant against List. Eat. Screech, cluck, screech, cluck, cluck, cluck. The great elf spat out a string of words, its tone similar to the phoenix's cry, but it was unknown if it had learned it from the phoenix. List could not understand, but that did not stop him from continuing. Come, eat, delicious jade powder cannot be missed. Screech. In the end, the great elf could not resist its desire for the jade powder. It rushed to List's hand, grabbed a small handful of jade powder, and ran away. After eating happily, it ran back again. After going back and forth 3 times, it saw List take out another handful of jade powder, and finally did not run away. Just like that, it sat on List's arm and ate. And so, List smeared some jade powder on his finger and sent it to its mouth. The great sprite was a beautiful, translucent, pale white. There was a round, star-shaped leaf on its head. It was very cute. It was puzzled at first, but it still took a bite of List's finger. The teeth of elves were especially good. After all, they were creatures that liked to eat jade powder. In addition, List used his chi to inflate the skin of his fingers, making it look as if it could be broken with a single blow. As soon as the great sprite moved its mouth, it immediately bit through List's skin. In an instant, he felt the connection between their souls, and a special sense of intimacy was transmitted. The great elf was confused, not knowing what was going on. List quickly sent a comforting message to it. "Don't be afraid, little guy. We're a family now. I have a lot of jade powder at home, you can eat as much as you want." Through the telepathic connection of the contract, the big elf understood. She nodded obediently and pointed at Leo, who was eating meat. Screech. It was actually expressing that it liked Leo. Is that so? List was very happy about his 4th great elf. Through the changes in his memories, he knew that this great elf was about 100 years old. It wasn't young, but it was calm and natural. It didn't have the violent temper of wild elves. Then, do you want to touch it? Yes. Then go ahead. Don't be afraid, Leo won't hurt you. Under List's encouragement, the great elf hesitated for a long time. Finally, it gathered its courage and flew to one of Leo's scales. Then, it reached out its little hand and carefully touched Leo. Then, it quickly flew back to List's side and grinned. Cluck, cluck, cluck. Leo glared at List with dissatisfaction. If List hadn't communicated with it through the dragon heart code and told it not to move, it would have definitely eaten this little guy. Achi curiously looked at the great elf, who was still making strange noises to express its laughter. Brother, since the great elf likes dragons, does it mean that it actually wants to complete its own evolution through contact with dragons? It was rumored that the great elf's evolution required the help of dragons in order to become a great elf. Of course, this was only a rumor, there was no definite proof. I don't know. List didn't know much about this, but it didn't prevent him from speculating. Since this great elf likes dragons and both have the fire attribute, perhaps it really is fate. Later, I will ask the Sapphire Grand Duke how the Sapphire family's great elf evolved. The Sapphire family had an oat dragon sprite, so it definitely knew how a great elf evolved into a great elf. 1 great elf, 1 lesser elf, and 2 sprite worms. 2 phoenix corpses, 14 phoenix feathers, and 3 phoenix eggs. List was very satisfied with the harvest from this trip to Burning Mountain. He decided that in the future, he would continue to inquire about the information of the inferior dragon and then go on an adventure. With the Magic Eye's secret skill, coupled with the upgraded version of Dragon Eye's orbit after man and dragon unite, no treasure could escape his search. This was undoubtedly a super powerful skill for treasure hunting. With this skill, he felt that he didn't need to establish a country to develop. Just by exploring, he could raise a dragon. Perhaps the dragons living in the wild relied on World of Warcraft, elves, and the like to live comfortably in the savage forest. Since this worm stalk tree was chosen by the phoenix to build its nest, but it is not a parasol tree, let's just call it Phoenix Perching Parasol Tree. After a discussion with a chi, List determined the species of the worm stalk tree, Phoenix Perching Parasol Tree. The great elf was the Phoenix Perching Parasol Tree. Sigh. The great elf touched the leaf on its head and didn't express its opinion. List continued, as for the phoenix perching parasol tree, its name is Ainea. Ainea was the name of the ice phoenix in League of Legends. The phoenix perching parasol tree great elf had an indissoluble bond with the phoenix, so List was far-fetched and gave it the name Ainea. The previous P great elf was called Ai Shi, and this phoenix perching parasol tree great elf was called Ainea. It sounded like they were brothers or sisters. Ainea! A Chi shouted. The great elf immediately turned to look at a Chi. It didn't get close or avoid her, but simply said, "Hey." It still couldn't speak, and in addition to its previous contact with the phoenix, it had learned a lot of bird language such as chirp and cluck, so it needed to be slowly corrected. List looked at Leo, who had finished eating the phoenix meat. "Come back." Leo immediately turned into a flame and rushed into his body. He motioned for Ainea to put away the worm stalk, and then began to set up camp. After the tent was set up, List took out the crystal lamp and discussed the changes of the phoenix feather with a Chi in depth. He always felt that the changes in the nature of the phoenix feather contained some kind of secret. Chapter 761. They discussed the changes to the phoenix feather until midnight, but there was still no hint of inspiration. List could only temporarily give up and put his hopes on the 3 phoenix eggs. Perhaps after the phoenix eggs hatched and he obtained a new phoenix, tamed it from a young age, and studied its tail feathers one by one, he would be able to find the clue of inspiration. Legend has it that the phoenix will be reborn from the ashes of fire, but the strength of this World of Warcraft doesn't match the legend, so I think it's necessary to reclassify the Sky Dragon. Add a beast behind the word Sky Dragon, and call it Sky Dragon. Or just call it Super Dragon and remove the name Sky Dragon. List said seriously. A Chi wasn't interested in this kind of thing, so she didn't have any objections. However, List proposed to compile official books like Yongla Grand Canon and Siku Quan Shu, but it was left to a Chi to edit. Among the 4 libraries of battle, magic, wisdom, and storytelling, he would definitely need books like the Magical Beasts Encyclopedia. The division of World of Warcraft's levels must be made clear from now on. A Chi, I think the previous division of Dragon and World of Warcraft isn't a good way to do it. The main reason is that Dragon doesn't seem to be much different from World of Warcraft. I think Dragon should be included in World of Warcraft, and be on the same level as World of Warcraft and Sea Monsters. I support Big Brother's division. When writing the World of Warcraft Encyclopedia, I will write it according to Big Brother's division. According to List's World of Warcraft's division, Dragon was a separate division. It didn't have anything to do with World of Warcraft, but was a separate division like Elves. World of Warcraft was a general term, and it had 3 branches. World of Warcraft was the main representative of World of Warcraft. It could be directly referred to as World of Warcraft, including Super Warcraft, High-level World of Warcraft, Middle-level World of Warcraft, and Low-level World of Warcraft. Below that were the land animals. Sea monsters were the representative of the sea in World of Warcraft, including Super Sea Monsters, High-level Sea Monsters, Middle-level Sea Monsters, Low-level Sea Monsters, and Normal Sea Monsters. Draconic beasts were the representatives of the dragon bloodline in World of Warcraft. They included super draconic beasts, high-level draconic beasts, medium-level draconic beasts, low-level draconic beasts, and an extension of the dragon species. Also, when I'm writing the World of Warcraft Encyclopedia, I'll remove the name Phoenix. With the power of these 2 birds, it's not appropriate to call them Phoenix, so I'll just call them Flame Dragon birds. In the future, all dragon beasts will have the word dragon in their names. Then what about Loki's chocobo, and Rose's rainbow dragon whale? A Chi asked. That's not necessarily the case. Only super dragons have their own naming rules. No matter what, the nature of the phoenix feather still has a unique charm. I'm thinking that the tortoiseshell from before should also be the product of this nature change. It should be the carapace of a turtle-type super dragon after it died. At first, List felt it was strange. The tortoiseshell was so small, how could there be such a big dragon? Now that he experienced the nature change of the phoenix feather, everything made sense. The tail feathers of the flame dragon bird and the unknown thunder tortoiseshell were the most special parts of the super dragon's body. After discussing the flame dragon bird, the two continued to discuss the phoenix parasol tree and the great elf infant. There were no other phoenix parasol trees around this fire elemental cordyceps tree, which was very strange. The strangest thing was that infant didn't know how to spread seeds, which was almost a standard elven magic. Now that the phoenix parasol tree didn't bear fruit, and there were no other trees of the same species to study, it was hard to determine its value. However, one thing was clear. When he returned to his territory and planted the phoenix parasol tree, he should place the flame dragon bird's nest on the tree branch again. List even had a guess as to where to place the phoenix parasol tree, the most suitable place to plant it on the volcano of Dodo Island. The next day, dawn. List was ready to return, but when he went to look for the slit-legged lizard he had tied to a mountain, he found that the lizard had already escaped. After searching for a while and not finding it, List awkwardly said to himself, "The mount that I gave to the oxtail marquis will have to be delayed again." He didn't have time to waste in the forest looking for a mount that could be tamed, so he had to ride Leo and fly into the blue sky and white clouds with regret. Infant, the phoenix parasol tree great elf, who was riding a dragon for the first time, was very excited. He sat in List's arms and constantly reached out to touch Leo's scales. List found it interesting. He turned the dragon's eyes and carefully observed Infant. He didn't find any physical or chemical reactions between the dragon's magic and Infant's magic, and there was no communication between them. So it was difficult to judge whether Infant's behavior was evolving into a dragon elf. He asked Infant why he wanted to touch Leo. He simply liked dragons, or rather, he liked fire dragons of the same magic attribute. Leo, he whispered, shouting the serpentines he had just learned. Infant likes. He crossed the continent and then crossed the sea. Finally, he returned to Black Horse Island 2 days later. The trip started on January 8, 154 of the Sapphire calendar and returned on January 18, taking a total of 10 days. In 10 days, there was no change in the territory. List was most concerned about the thorn elf, Ella, who passed messages through the magic platform every day. There was no change either. Before he left, he was still in a daze. His evolution continued, and he didn't know when he would grow up successfully. However, after the territory's third great elf, Infant, moved into the worm room, Ella, who was in a daze, finally became irritable again. His spirit was constantly excited, and the long-lost cry of, "woo-woo," sounded again in the aisle. Hearing this sound, the great P-elf, Ike, would fly in the aisle and look at the door of Ella's worm room thoughtfully. But Ella learned to be good, only shouting in his room and never going out. He couldn't appreciate Ike's rope art. Woo-woo. Standing in front of the glass door, Ella stared at Ike, who was in deep thought. She was waiting for the power in her body to surge up. Just after List brought back the third great elf, Ella finally felt some kind of power pouring out of her body. She squeezed her small fist and could feel that the small fist seemed to be expanding. Woo-woo. Ike narrowed her eyes and felt that Ella, who was hiding in the room, was very boring. She simply went back to her room, grabbed a few hemp ropes, and constantly wove them into various shapes. Occasionally, she would show a knowing smile. She didn't know what she was fantasizing about, or she had other ideas. After laughing for a while, she got up again, flew out of the door, and swayed at the door of the next worm room. She didn't see any elves in the flushing room, and she seemed a little lost. A new great elf, who seemed to be called Infant, lived in this room. Chapter 762. On the Dodo Island. The light green stone dragon was still asleep. Leo dove into the magma at the mouth of the volcano. 10 days of volcano supreme demon condensation was enough for him to enjoy a supreme demon feast. List asked Infant, who was sitting on his shoulder, "What do you think of the environment here? Should we plant the cordyceps here?" Infant sniffed and shook its head. Huh. What it meant was that it liked the fire elemental magic power at the crater, and Leo also cultivated here, but there was no water in the soil near the crater. Then where do you think is suitable on the Dodo Island? After picking and choosing, Infant finally chose a spot halfway up the mountain and planted its cordyceps. In the blink of an eye, a 30-meter-tall tree grew vigorously, standing out among the skulls. List also took out the bird nest and put it on the original branch. He also took out a flaming dragon egg and put it inside. Achi, let's go back and forth to the Dodo Island in the next few days and try to figure out how to hatch the flaming dragon egg. Is it better to hatch it naturally or artificially? Achi nodded. At this moment, Infant suddenly exclaimed, "Infant! Hey! Huh!" List received emotional fluctuations from Infant. It was expressing something to List. "Are you saying that you've seen a flaming dragon egg hatch and spit fire to roast it? Hey!" Infant flapped its wings and circled the bird nest, expressing to List that it was now a flaming dragon. It slowly landed on a branch next to the bird nest, aimed at the nest, and puffed its cheeks, imitating the flaming dragon egg hatching. It also changed its position to show that the two flaming dragons were taking turns to spit fire. List found Infant's vivid description of the hatching of the blazing dragon bird to be particularly interesting. The blazing dragon bird hatches its eggs using flames. "Achi, do you think we should give it a try?" Achi pointed at the bird's nest and said, "Brother, look, the branches of the bird's nest look a bit like the branches of the phoenix tree. Maybe we can check if spitting fire will destroy the bird's nest. If it doesn't, it's very likely that what Infant described is the process of the egg hatching." "That makes sense." List immediately tried it out. He didn't know how to spit fire, but his fire attribute Dragon Battle Chi could transform into flames. He immediately aimed at the bird's nest and burned it. Just as he had guessed, the branches in the bird's nest would not burn, or rather, the phoenix parasol tree was not afraid of fire. The next step was simple. List put the egg back in and started to burn it. At the same time, he cast magic eyes and carefully observed the burning process. He discovered that the egg would absorb fire attribute mana during the burning process, and then the mana inside the egg would slowly flow as if it was growing. After burning for half an hour, the bird egg finally stopped absorbing magic power. List wanted to continue burning, but Infant flew over and shook his head at him. "Hey!" He was telling List that he had cooked enough. In other words, half an hour a day should be enough? Infant couldn't answer. He just instinctively stopped List from continuing to burn. He didn't know why. Even so, he had already provided a lot of help to the hatching of the fire dragon bird. List took out a piece of jade to reward him. Infant immediately hugged the jade and chewed on it happily. The method to hatch the fire dragon bird has been found. In that case, there is no need to incubate it in the nest. I can hold it and burn it at any time," he said, preparing to take out the egg. However, Infant cried again, "Hey! You can't take it out? Hey!" Infant made some random gestures, roughly meaning what was the relationship between the phoenix parasol tree and the egg, and that it was best to put the egg in the bird's nest. It seemed that the egg would also help him. Unfortunately, Infant's expression logic was a bit messy, and List couldn't figure it out. After asking a few times, Infant was so anxious that he didn't know how to explain. Achi suddenly said, "Brother, Achi feels that there is a complementary connection between Infant's worm stalk and the fire dragon bird egg. The aura between the two can form a blurry mini magic net, forming a stable and active field to promote each other's growth. Is that so?" List was surprised that elves could actually have a connection with super dragons. Since Achi had already sensed that Infant desired the egg, he was relieved. He put all 3 eggs into the bird's nest and instructed Infant, "Then I'll leave the fire dragon eggs in your care. You must take good care of them, I will roast them every day." "Hey! It's the same for a chi." "Hey!" Infant agreed immediately, feeling that life was full of happiness. There was delicious jade powder to eat, there were eggs to promote growth, and there was a fire dragon to touch. His life now was truly wonderful. Its emotions undoubtedly infected List. He thought of something and directly brought Infant to where the light green gem dragon was sleeping. He pointed at the light green gem dragon and said, "If you like to touch dragons, there's another one here." Infant looked curiously at the light green gem dragon, carefully stepped forward and touched its scales, but soon turned back. Infant likes Leo. This sentence meant that it did not like the light green gem dragon. "If you don't like it, then forget it." List nodded and roughly understood that there were similarities between elves and dragons. Different elves liked different dragons. No wonder Ike, Ella, and other elves who had seen Leo did not show any affection towards him. It was not compatible. When Leo came out of the crater, List left the Dodo Island, but he did not take Infant with him. The elves could not be too far away from their worm stalks for a long time. The Dodo Island was more than 800 kilometers away from Black Horse Island. This distance had exceeded the elves' limit. So he let Infant stay on the Dodo Island and take care of the 3 fire dragon eggs. There were no large animals here, so Infant's safety could be guaranteed. Moreover, there was a sleeping dragon that was constantly emitting dragon power. The small animals on the island were probably exterminated by the dragon power. Back to Black Horse Island. Chris Truth immediately came to Thorn Castle to show List the improved binary magic platform core machine. The new core machine no longer used a dialing form, but a trigger mechanism. There were 2 more straight grips outside the box. 3 mages were required to cooperate. 1 read the binary code, 1 operated fire magic, and 1 operated water magic. Then the grips were pulled according to the coding sequence. The runes of the internal compass were triggered through the linkage device, thus activating the magic platform to transmit information. These 3 mages were the messengers. One of the messengers who read the code also worked as an operator, accepting messages from another magic platform, recording the magic reaction on the compass one by one, and translating it into text. In fact, this set of operations could be completed by the same mage. The left hand of the water element, the right hand of the fire element, and the input of the code. Of course, no matter how skilled they were, it was still difficult to transmit information quickly due to the simple function of the magic platform itself, which was inefficient. They could only look forward to continuous improvement in the future and strive to achieve the effect of the Earth's radio station. In the future, they would do research to achieve the effect of a video phone, synchronizing the transmission of images and sounds. Even further, they could break through the limitations of matter and achieve the effect of a transmission array. Chapter 763. This chapter is titled Book Friend 201810021504217664. Thank you for updating it. The 3 fast court sailing ships were the Exploration, Discovery, and Opportunity. All the experimental materials of the Guild of Magic were used to construct 3 binary core magic platforms, and a spare magic platform was placed on the flagship, the Exploration. The sailing ceremony was grand and solemn. The heavy snow was still swirling, and the night was covered in snow. List personally handed the 3 flags embroidered with a dragon-shaped flame pattern to the captains of the 3 exploration ships, the leader of the exploration team and the captain of the exploration, Yevich Peanut, and the other 2 Earth Knight captains trained by the territory. When the dragon-shaped flame flag was raised high, the 3 exploration ships slowly sailed toward the sea. This meant that the first step to establishing a country had been taken. All that was left was to find a suitable archipelago, move there, and develop. It was not until the 3 ships disappeared into the dark clouds that List turned back. The construction of the territory continued as usual. The serfs of Iron Hoof City were transported in batches and quickly participated in the construction and development of the territory. All the serfs were full of smiles, not because they found the living conditions of the territory good, but because they had become serfs of the Dragon Knight. How could the serfs of the future king be treated the same as ordinary serfs? Although they still needed to farm, the benefits were definitely better than ordinary serfs. Your Highness, the negotiating team has confirmed with the trade representatives of the 3 marquises that half of the profits from future trade cooperation will be invested in serf trade. With the price of our serfs, the marquises will definitely be willing to use serfs to pay for the benefits, thus saving gold coins. The 3 marquises were the Marquis of Oxtail, the Marquis of Red Crab Island, and the Marquis of Golden Island, which were the partners that List chose to cooperate with glass, paper, and sea salt. The trade channels of these 3 marquises were with the coastal marquises of the Iron and Steel Ridge Kingdom. In addition, List also had his own trade channel, mainly with Marquis Nuteo of the Eagle Kingdom to carry out smuggling trade on the sea. Marquis Nuteo had suffered heavy losses in 2 major battles and had to find ways to make up for the losses. Sea salt was currently the largest smuggled trade. Marquis Nuteo pretended to respond to the king's call and bought a large number of Eagle Kingdom sailboats to harass the Sapphire Fleet at sea in search of the light green gem dragon. Actually, under the cover of the Flame Captain's fleet, they had arrived at a designated 3rd island to conduct a sea salt trade. The method of trade was to exchange serfs for sea salt. 1 ship of sea salt for 1 ship of serfs. It was clear and concise. A ship of sea salt sold on the mainland could be exchanged for about 5 or 6 ships of serfs, or even 10 ships of serfs. It could be said that the sea salt trade was a profitable business for both Marquis Wildtao and List. The cost of sunning the sea salt was almost zero, and it was just the labor cost. Currently, the Flame Lord was frantically basking in the sea salt. Of course, he had to monopolize the technology. No one would dare to take advantage of his technology. If he discovered that someone was also sunning sea salt, List would not show any mercy. The Dragon Knight was synonymous with monopoly. After learning of List's sea salt trade, even the Sapphire family only came to ask if they could participate in the trade, rather than thinking of stealing the technology. At present, the cooperation with the Sapphire family was still under discussion. The main issue was the division of profits, which had reached an impasse. The Sapphire family hoped to buy it out by paying a patent fee or protection fee, while List insisted on buying the technology and participating in the profit dividends. Of course, whether it was the Sapphire Grand Duke or List, neither would be too entangled. After all, the 2 were temporarily in an offensive and defensive alliance. It would not be difficult to reach a trade cooperation if they each took a step back. Isaiah, carefully discuss with the officials to find a balance between the territory's expenses and income, and then appropriately increase the proportion of serfs purchased. We have to hoard serfs for the future establishment of a country. When a new country is established, the serf trade will not necessarily go smoothly. List knew very well that once he announced the establishment of a country, the mainland kingdom would never sit idly by. They might not be able to launch a second war of the dragon slaying, but they would definitely curb the development. The most powerful means was to crack down on the serf trade. There was no way to ban the serf trade, but the price of serfs during the crackdown would definitely skyrocket, greatly delaying the development of the new country. Your Highness, please rest assured that we will find a balance as soon as possible and redesign the distribution plan with several trade channels. Master, have you noticed that Jessie has been very happy these days? Butler Carter said with a smile. What is Jessie happy about? List asked while playing with Ella, who was growing up. Jessie was the castle's main valet and an old man who had followed List from the beginning. With the help of the Guild of Magic, old Phil finally got his wife pregnant. Is that so? Congratulations. List smiled. He was very familiar with old Phil. He had collected a large amount of blood from this descendant of the sun because of his bloodline. After the great mages of the Guild of Magic knew Old Phil's identity, they formulated a pig-rearing plan to let Old Phil desperately make little people strive to cultivate a new son of the sun who could release druid transformation magic and verify magic such as bear transformation, leopard transformation, and so on. Butler Carter was at a loss. "There is one thing that I don't know if I should report to you, Master." "Go ahead." "The mages of the Guild of Magic bought a lot of prostitutes from other places and forced Old Phil to have sex with them. I heard that Old Phil has lost a lot of weight." List suddenly didn't know what to say. Should he say that Old Phil was lucky with women, or that the mages were absurd, or that the Guild of Magic was behaving improperly? He was stunned for a while before asking, was Old Phil forced? Was his wife also threatened by the mages? It is said that the mages promised Old Phil's wife that they would groom her son to become a mage in the future, so the woman ignored Old Phil and even encouraged him to cooperate. As for Old Phil, he must have been half-hearted. Poor Jesse, he still doesn't know about Old Phil. "Alright, I got it." List did not express his opinion. He was prepared to mention this when he saw Crazy later. Although this matter did not violate the rules of the Guild of Magic, nor the territory's laws. He had even tacitly agreed to Lars and the other great mages regarding Old Phil's matter. But it was ultimately not a good influence. This could already be considered a human experiment. He had a plan in mind. The next time a similar experimental project is established, it must be approved by me. I must not allow the mages to conduct random research, especially research that involves humans and dragons. Old Phil's luck with women was not a big deal, and List quickly put it to the back of his mind. He carried Ella, who had grown up a lot, with one hand and walked upstairs to a Chi's laboratory, ready to let a Chi give Ella a full-body examination. He wanted to see Ella's health and collect some data on the evolution of the elves. Wow! Chapter 764. As the saying goes, even if you've never eaten pork, you've never seen a pig run. List was not a researcher before his time travel, but just an ordinary office worker. However, he knew more or less about scientific experiments and knew that the collection of experimental data was a very important part of the process. Moreover, it was necessary to establish a reference system and compare the information over and over again in order to get valuable results, such as Mendel's pea experiment. The laws of nature were always there, the only difference was whether you could find them or not. Although the magicians of the legendary continent were a group of smart people, they did not have good experimental habits. Coupled with the secret inheritance, they always liked to do their own secret experiments. There was no systematic operation plan, no detailed experimental records, and even no repeatability. Therefore, the prosperous magic civilization of the Moon Empire quickly declined after the magic net shrank. In the process of teaching magic to a Chi, List instilled many scientific experimental methods in her, the most important of which was information collection. She wanted to study elves and dragons, but if she did not collect enough information, it would be meaningless to rely on imagination. For example, when studying elves now, a single elf could provide too little information, but with hundreds of elves providing information, a lot of information about elves would naturally be revealed. An elf's evolution may reveal very few secrets. If she continued to record and collect more and more elves' evolution data, she would definitely find valuable clues and crack the essence of elven evolution. Ella's body is very healthy, and all physiological characteristics remain highly active. Through the magic net, the magic radiation it emits is getting closer and closer to the magic radiation of the great elves. It should be able to evolve successfully soon. A Chi led Lucy and Ruth, constantly recording the collected data. Lucy and Ruth, the twin magic apprentices, were originally recommended by List to Crazy, but the two little girls did show strong magic talent, and a Chi had already taken them as laboratory assistants. The most important thing was that Crazy was too busy to stay in the laboratory every day. If the Guild of Magic continued to grow, Crazy would probably have to transform into an administrative staff, and there would be no time for her to do experiments and practice magic. Of course, Crazy herself was not a talented magician. Being a great magician was basically the end of her magic cultivation. In this era of the magic net, it was far more difficult to become a magic shooter than to become a dragon knight. Wow! Ella complained that Achi, Lucy, and Ruth had just touched her. Lucy, however, did not know this. Instead, she said happily, "Your Highness, Ella is so cute. I wish I could hold an elf every day." She still had the temperament of a child. In fact, she was just a child. Before the serf trade, she lived in the countryside, and after the serf trade, she lived in the Mage Tower, so she didn't suffer too much. On the contrary, it was the younger sister, Ruth, who was more mature, who said, "Lucy, don't have such daring fantasies. All elves are His Highness' private property." This was a good realization. Indeed, all the elves in the territory belonged to List. It could only belong to List. The Lord had the right to control all the production of the territory. Even if the farmland rented out to the commoners gave birth to elves, the elves would still belong to List. Of the two freckled twins, the elder sister was lively and innocent, and the younger sister was mature and sensible. List liked both of them very much. Study magic well. The most important thing is to learn how to do experiments, so that you can grow into useful people and crack more mysteries of truth. Ruth replied, "Lucy and I will study hard and become qualified magicians. We will work hard for His Highness and repay His Highness for his cultivation." 9:00 in the morning. List carried Ella to the stone square specially designed for the blizzard beasts to toss and turn. Emily was already standing in the stone square, letting the snowflakes fall on her hair and shoulders, surrounded by frolicking blizzard beasts. Seeing List, the blizzard beasts immediately lined up under Dosen's command. "Dosen, come here. Woof. From now on, you will train with Emily and follow her instructions. Woof." Dosen was a little reluctant, but he still obeyed List's orders. He walked in front of Emily and turned his head to shout at the 8 little ones. Suddenly, the 8 little ones also lined up in front of Emily. "Emily, you can start training." List stood on a stone, the dragon Do-Chi on his body was surging, and the snowflakes had evaporated before they could get close to him. "Yes, Your Highness." With List's presence, Emily's training went smoothly. According to the training methods guided by List, she constantly ran in with Dosen and increased the degree of tacit understanding. Then, with the authority of Dosen, she commanded the 8 little ones to obey orders, thus controlling the entire Blizzard Beast team. Compared with List's free and easy training when training the Blizzard Beasts, Emily's training work can be described as meticulous. In other words, List's training was like an owner working hard to train a husky, while Emily's training was like training a police dog. Sometimes List had to admit that he really lagged behind a genius like Emily in terms of perseverance, diligence, talent, attitude, etc. Without the power of fate brought about by the smoke mission, his own achievements would have been absolutely limited. No wonder I was just an office worker before I crossed over. Fortunately, after crossing over, not only did I master the power of fate, but I am also so handsome. List's fate was more driven forward. As an elder once said, a person's fate, of course, depends on personal struggle, but also the process of history. The smoke dragon chose List, and List respected its choice. He examined everything he had done in the past 3 years and felt that he had done nothing else in Flower Town. There were probably 3 things. First, integrate into the feudal lord-knight system. Second, introduce scientific experimental theory into magic. Third, ride a few dragons. Of course, the War of Dragons is also very big, and another thing is to develop the trade of new products in an all-round way. It couldn't be considered spectacular, but it was just a small change. Wow! Ella interrupted List's reminiscence of youth, and then, under List's gaze, it stammered, Li. List, huh? Jia, la. Wah. When it continued to shout its name, Ella laughed happily. Its vocal cords were slowly developing and it could finally speak. This also meant that it had basically completed its own evolution from a thorn sprite to a thorn sprite. Chapter 765. Ella's growth was almost different every day. At the end of January, it reached the size of a baby, 50 centimeters tall. The magic in its body stabilized and it became a qualified thorn sprite. Wow, Ella is strong. The first thing this little fellow did after evolving from a thorn's worm to a great sprite was to trap the gold-thread little sprite in the worm room and scold it. Little gold-thread stinking of bitterness, the next time I see you being so arrogant, I'll beat you into a mute. The gold-thread elf looked at Ella from the window. She pouted and was not convinced. But Ella was now bigger, stronger, and very vigorous. It was an existence that the gold-thread sprite didn't want to provoke. Although the gold-thread sprite jumped, it always bullied the weak and feared the strong in the worm room area of the castle. It didn't provoke the pea sprite, Ike. So the current Ella was also someone it didn't dare to provoke. Waving its fist, Ella was very satisfied with the gold-thread sprite's appearance. It turned around and flew, shouting, Ella is mighty. Wow! The next place to visit was Ike's worm room. Do you want to be tied up by me again? Ike's expression was calm. She didn't feel much about the grown-up Ella. After all, the sprite was a cold species. Do you understand the art of ropes? Do you know what ropes can create? If you don't understand, you are not qualified to talk to me. After that, it raised its head and looked at Ella faintly. As when it first came to the castle, it always looked calm, but no elf knew what kind of soul was hidden in its heart. Ella was stunned for a moment. When it was a little sprite, its intelligence was limited. When it was a big sprite, its intelligence had increased a lot. However, Ike's words were like listening to a foreign language. In fact, Ike was speaking the language of the wind, but as an elf of List who mastered snake and wind, Ella also understood the language of the wind. It didn't understand what the other party was saying, but Ella knew that it couldn't be scared at this time. It snarled, Wow! You bastard! Bang! Ash closed the door to the bug room and smiled disdainfully, ignorant and vulgar. The metal door almost hit Ella in the face, making her furious. However, there was nothing she could do to Ike. The bug house was made of rock, the door was made of steel, and the windows were made of glass. All of these could block the magic of sowing seeds, so it could not attack her from afar. It wanted to kick the door, but when it kicked the iron door, it hurt its foot instead. Wah! He thought about it. It was a little annoying. I decided to temporarily put aside any thoughts of settling my grudge with Ike. Instead, I flew down the stairs and arrived at the underwater bug room on the second basement floor. He searched through the bug houses in the pond one by one, but he couldn't find any trace of the giant kelp sprite Parker. The great sprite that had called him ugly had disappeared. Just as it was about to continue searching, List had already used his mind to call it back. Wow, Ella, Thorn Castle is the strongest. Back in front of List, Ella stood on the table, swaggering with her hands on her hips, full of fighting spirit. List patted its head. Remember what I taught you. You are not allowed to fight in the castle, you are not allowed to bully other elves. The most important thing is that you have become a great sprite, so you have to be quiet. If you feel bored, go to the thorns and be a great sprite with moral, intellectual, physical, and aesthetic development. He had let it indulge for a while, but now it was time to control it and not indulge it any further. Ella's active and irritable personality was probably its motivation, but it had to be said that it was annoying to be so noisy all the time. He now had 4 great sprites. The giant kelp sprite Parker was narcissistic and poisonous, but if you didn't look for it, it would never bother you. It lived in its own underwater castle all day long. The pea sprite AI she liked to pursue rope skills. Perhaps her taste was a bit unique, but she had always been quiet and would not bother anyone. The phoenix tree sprite Annie lived in the wild and helped to take care of the fire dragon eggs. Not only was she not annoying, but she could also contribute. Her personality was somewhat similar to the mangrove sprite Nami. They were both elves that were not valuable, but because of their hard work, they were liked. Only the thorn sprite, Ella, did not change her bad temper. Instead, she became noisier. Ella wants them to admit that Ella is the strongest in the castle. Ella's competitive mood was still strong. When she was a little sprite, she dared to challenge the great sprites. Now, one could imagine. Feeling Ella's mood, List felt that it was not a good idea to suppress it, so he said, "Relying on fists or words to fight for strength will not convince other elves, do you understand?" "I don't understand." "That is, even if they admit that you are strong, they will still not admit that you are strong in their hearts. Admit it, Ella is the strongest." The idea was simple. No matter what they think, as long as they admit that they are the strongest, it was enough. This was the idea of the elves, and it was difficult for List to use human thoughts to bring them in. However, he was not discouraged. "Ella, there is no victory or defeat in the battle, and I will not allow it. If you really want to be the strongest elf in Thorn Castle, then there is a very good way. Do you know Annie? Annie is about to evolve into a dragon elf. If you can evolve into a dragon elf before him, all the elves here will worship you." Wow! Ella did not quite understand what a dragon elf was. List gestured while communicating with it. "The dragon elf is this big, 1 meter high, and its body is becoming more and more like a human. It is full of wisdom, knows how to wear clothes, and knows how to learn knowledge. It can help the master manage all the elves and become the administrator of the elves." The Grand Duke had written back to List about the information about the dragon elf, introducing the oat dragon elf of the sapphire family. As a dragon-raising family, a total of 2 dragon elves have been cultivated in the history of more than 150 years. The earliest one was the juniper dragon elf, which was the legendary dragon elf of the bull family. The gin was brewed by the juniper dragon elf. At that time, the first Grand Duke was still alive. He passed the sapphire dragon to his eldest son and the dragon elf to his youngest son, the first Marquis Bull. Now that the bull family had rebelled, the eldest son had already run to the Eagle Kingdom with the juniper dragon elf, living in an unknown corner. The sapphire family cultivated a second dragon elf in the decades after the death of the first Grand Duke, which was the current oat dragon elf. According to the description of the Grand Duke, the 2 great elves, Juniper and Oat, were very fond of the sapphire dragon. They were close to the sapphire dragon all day long and unknowingly became dragon elves. The change happened without warning, but one day, the great elf began to grow. However, the probability of evolution of the great elf was not high. In more than 150 years, there were 10 great elves who liked the sapphire dragon, and only 2 of them evolved. The others left the sapphire dragon one day and no longer liked the sapphire dragon. This was probably the evolution failure. So far, there were still 2 great elves who liked the sapphire dragon very much and were with Sapphire all day long. But they liked it for more than 20 years, still just liked it and did not evolve. Therefore, List already understood that the Phoenix Parasol Tree Great Elf, Infant, was on the verge of evolution. He did not know how long it would take to evolve, or if the evolution failed. He was ready to experiment one by one with Ike, Parker, and Ella to see if they could also touch the edge of evolution. He was a man with 2 dragons, and there were more dragons waiting for him in the future. The fire dragon did not like to change to the light emerald dragon, the light emerald dragon did not like to change to the invisible dragon, and the invisible dragon did not like to change to any other dragon. Chapter 766. They no longer had to squeeze on a 3-meter diameter shell when they went out to sea. After the transformation of the Sunset, the second 3-masted ship was officially launched at the Newport town dock. However, this ship was very strange. It had no sails, masts, oars, or rudders, only a ship frame, decorated with several large cabins and a luxurious captain's cabin at the bow. The ship was named the Flame. It was List's second flagship, and its power was Achi's ability to control water. Since experiencing Achi's high-speed navigation by controlling the shell, he had been designing the Flame to make it convenient for him and Achi to travel. Especially every time he traveled between Black Horse Island and Dodo Island, he needed to spend the night there while waiting for Leo, staying in a dilapidated cabin or setting up his own tent. But with this special Flame, he could rest in the ship's luxurious cabin. Achi also had a large cabin as a laboratory, which was convenient for her to do experiments during her travels. At the same time, as long as it was not a secret voyage, such as Heart Island and Dodo Island, she could bring servants with her to other places and enjoy the servant service. The Flame didn't bring any servants with it on its first voyage. It was just that List and Achi lived in the luxurious cabin at the bow of the ship. Then, Achi controlled the seawater, and the Flame shot out like a torpedo, creating 2 huge waves and disappeared from the seaside. It's amazing. His Highness the Magic Shooter is too powerful. The Dragon Knight and the Magic Shooter are indeed the pinnacle of power. No one is a match for His Highness in the sea. Once we establish a nation, we will be the new overlord of the sea. The knight who saw them off could not help but exclaim as he looked at the calm sea. Of course, distance makes beauty. But sometimes you can only feel incredible up close. List and Achi appeared frequently in the territory. Not only did this not cause aesthetic fatigue, but every time they appeared, it would lead to a burst of fanatical worship. This small island on the edge of the legendary continent was gradually becoming a part of the legend. At least mages from nearby kingdoms were already on a pilgrimage to Black Horse Island. Snowflakes fell one by one. The Flame sailed on the rough sea like it was on flat ground, without any ups and downs. Achi was multitasking. In addition to controlling the Flame, she was also drawing the pattern of the magic array. She had already begun to try to create a second type of super magic. The proof of the principle had already been completed. This new super spell was temporarily named Spiral Super High Pressure Water Drill. It was similar to the super spell, Chainsaw Super High Pressure Water Knife, but the structure of the magic array was different. Theoretically, the power of the spell was also different. The water knife focused on the cutting effect, while the water diamond focused on the piercing effect. List held a glass of milk and watched Achi draw seriously. He didn't know if he felt a little ashamed. Achi created her own super spells from scratch. She had to worry about so many magic experiments every day, but she still created water daggers and water drills. Up until now, he had yet to comprehend the third move of the Fire Dragon Knight, Dragon Battle Technique. He had yet to master the first move, Dragon Slash, and the second move, Burning the Heavens. Of course, it was not that List was lazy. It was just that he had too many things to worry about and didn't put all his energy into cultivation. Brother, we're almost at Dodo Island. This voyage took a total of 86 minutes. It's slightly slower than when I control the shell, and it consumes more magic power. Achi said without raising her head. Almost as soon as she finished speaking, Dodo Island appeared in her field of vision. It traveled more than 800 kilometers in 86 minutes. In other words, the speed of the Flame was close to 560 kilometers per hour, which was almost half the speed of sound. It was still a little worse than a civil aircraft that cruised at about 800 kilometers per hour. It was even worse than a fighter jet, which could travel at more than 2,000 kilometers per hour. But in this world, this kind of sailing speed could only be described as terrifying. Boom! The waterspout directly carried the Flame to the shore. When the water receded, the ship was placed firmly on the beach. List stood up, and a flame rushed out of his chest. The flame exploded in mid-air, and a fire dragon with a wingspan of 25 meters soared in the air. Its wingspan was 25 meters, not 20. After eating the carcass of a fire dragon bird and eating 10 phoenix feathers from List, Leo's wingspan directly expanded by 5 meters, and his body was a lot bigger. If it weren't for the need to continue his research, List wouldn't mind letting it eat the other fire dragon bird's carcass and the remaining 6 phoenix feathers. He had tasted the meat of the fire dragon bird. It tasted average and not as delicious as chicken. However, it contained an abundance of fire element magic, which was a great supplement for knights with fire element chi. One bite of the earth knight was equivalent to a day's worth of medicine. Oh, roar! Leo roared and rushed to the crater of the Dodo Island to complete its cultivation. List patted the 3 jade boxes in the room, and suddenly the 3 sleeping elves, Ella, Ash, and Parker, woke up one after another. Ella and Ash landed on List's shoulders. They could fly. Parker couldn't fly, so he could only let List hold him in his hand. Wow! Ella stared at Ash. Ash's eyes were calm, and she looked curiously at the island in front of her, ignoring Ella. Parker chuckled and said, "The handsome Parker is here." At this time, there was a burst of bird cries in the distance, and then the phoenix nest parasol tree great elf infant flew over. "List, you're here." His serpentine pronunciation was practiced well, but he still hadn't changed the bird language. He would speak bird language whenever he was happy. "Infant, you continue to learn serpentine and wind language from a chi here. I have something to do with the light green gem dragon." "Okay, List." The snow on the sleeping light green gem dragon was not too deep. It felt that its recent breathing was getting stronger and stronger, and it seemed that it might wake up at any time. "Ella, Ash, Parker, do you like this dragon?" List mainly took the great elves to see the dragon to see if they liked it and if they could touch the opportunity of evolution. He had tested Leo before, and the 3 great elves had no feelings for Leo. Parker was the first to speak. "Handsome Parker doesn't like this dragon." "List, you know what I mean. I like a water dragon. I can travel around on a water dragon, and no sea monster dares not to give me and the water dragon face. This dragon doesn't look handsome enough." In fact, List didn't have high hopes for Parker. It was normal for sea elves to be close to water dragons, because no other dragon would jump into the sea to be close to them. Ash was the second to speak. She stood on the light green gem dragon and took out a rope from nowhere. She pulled the rope and made a few gestures at the light green gem dragon. "No, it's too big. My rope can't tie it." "List, do you need to tie it?" "No, thank you." "You're welcome." The great P-elf might not be compatible, or it might not have triggered the opportunity, but it had no feelings for the light green gem dragon. In the end, only Ella was left. Ella had just evolved into a great elf, and she was only 11 years old. So after touching the scales of the light green gem dragon, she was confused. She didn't know what List was going to do. In short, none of the 3 great elves had the opportunity to evolve. "Let's go. Your business is over. Go back to the flame and continue to sleep." List put the 3 great elves back in the box and let a chi take care of them. List and Infant went to the phoenix parasol tree to prepare to barbecue the fire dragon egg. Just as he was about to leave, the binary magic platform in the room suddenly made a sound. It was a message: "You're tuning in to the Xiaofan's Wuxia Tales YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories."